Okay, thank you all. And we're now starting our afternoon session of different presentations. But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment out to thank Lois Lindahl for her excellent support. Can I tell them where you're? Yeah. Lois currently lives in Mexico. So we are, just so lucky to have her. She moved and said, I'm still going to be involved with NAMI Tri-Valley. So we're extremely grateful. And thank you, Lois.
Oh, thank you guys. This is a great team to be a part of.
Thank you. So next we have Brian Lawrence. And Brian is a retired police lieutenant with over 32 years of law enforcement experience, and which is marriage and family therapy. And he presents on a number of topics to law enforcement and community-based organizations, to include crisis de-escalation and suicide prevention for family and caregivers. So Brian has been a vital link in the community for families to connect because of his background in law enforcement. We are very grateful that he is here today. Brian.
Thank you very much, Marcia. It's always an honor to be asked to present for the workshop. For those of you who've seen me before, in past years, I presented on law enforcement response for 5150s and what to expect on that. And then this year, I'm speaking on caregiving. But if during the break, if you have a question about the subject that I used to present on, feel free to reach out. I've been out of law enforcement for about 5 years now, and that was about when I started working on my hours to become a licensed marriage and family therapist. A little bit of my history: I served in the military, served in law enforcement. So like many of us in therapy, we tend to gravitate towards things that have been helpful for us. I've been a consumer of mental health services, and it's very helpful, wonderful now to be able to give back. I also have family members who suffer from serious mental illnesses. And I'm probably unusual, well, more ways than one, but to go from law enforcement to therapy, typically not what you would always see. My heart is really for working with first responders, but I also work with couples. I work with non-first responders. I work with pastors, anyone who's in need of help. I've spent the past year and a half since being licensed, really enjoying being able to help people make change in their life. All right, so if we can go to the next slide, please. A little note from our legal and ethics department. I know Marcia already mentioned this, but this presentation is intended to provide us with some general information and considerations related to self-care. It is not offered as or intended to be any form of psychotherapeutic treatment, and you're encouraged to seek out professional help if your circumstances so indicate. But I will be talking about some of the things that I use in therapy that have been helpful too. Nothing really extravagant or anything that's would be very stressful for anybody to try themselves. But some of the things I offer, you're welcome to research on your own, just like other presenters have talked about some tools that might be helpful for you. There's kind of a fine line. Like I was telling Marcia, in a law and ethics course, they tell you if you're a therapist, don't even tell people that you're a therapist unless you have informed consent and you're treating them. And I agree with that for the most part, but how else would we talk about some of the experiences that we're all going through and things that we found helpful if we didn't at least stretch ourselves up a little bit and present some of these things. But again, this is not intended to be therapy at all, but some good things to consider. If as we go through this presentation, you think, given some of these issues I'm dealing with, causing me a lot of stress, it might be helpful to talk to a professional. So anyways, enough from the legal and ethics departments. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to be talking about is why it's helpful to help ourselves, and I count myself in that as well, how we can help others and how we can help ourselves. So, How's that for a nice government kind of general answer there? All right, first off, let's talk a little bit about the impact of caregiving on physical and mental health, because we as caregivers, we are a population at risk. And this information is from caregiver.org. Those of us who care for others, we tend to have higher levels of depression, higher levels of stress and frustration. And there are sex differences because women tend to be 2/3 of all unpaid caregivers. There's an increased likelihood of using substances and engaging in other harmful behaviors, right? Because it's very, very stressful to be a caregiver. And sometimes we tend to employ some less than helpful coping strategies there. We tend to have reduced overall physical health and increased risk for chronic conditions. These include heart disease, cancer, and arthritis, nearly 2 times that of non-caregivers. So that's why it's really important to be focused upon this. Many of us who care for others, we already kind of know this intuitively, right? But this is just more evidence to make sure that we're taking time to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to take care of others. And that last one, we do tend to have lower levels of self-care. We're so busy worrying about the other person that we forget to focus upon ourselves. Next slide, please. All right, so first off, what can we do to support a loved one or a friend with a mental health condition? Many of you are, I'm sure, are doing some of these things already. And just a quick note on this too, the information I'm presenting, I don't really see myself as an expert. And actually, when you look at all of us attending this presentation, there's probably several hundred years of experience among all of us taking care of ourselves, taking care of others. So there'll be a point where I'm hopeful that I'm not going to offer an exhaustive list, but to get some input from others of you, what you have found to be helpful too. So, but things that are helpful, first off, learn what you can about the person's condition and its treatment. That can be through either if you have their consent to attend a session with them, or maybe getting to know a little bit more about what it is that they're dealing with, some of the treatment options available to them. This next one's good. Accept that the condition is influencing their behavior. I know that a loved one of mine, before I really got into the therapy field, I really took it personal what they were doing. And the more I learned about their condition, the more I was able to, there's so much power in attribution. We may not like the person's behavior and what they're doing and what they're saying, but it's very helpful when we're able to attribute it to the condition and not necessarily something personal between them and us. If they're willing, shown interest in their treatment plan, encourage them to follow their treatment plan. Express your support out loud, but remember, support is not control. There's a certain amount of self-determination for folks. One of the things that is emphasized for us as therapists is that unless someone's a danger to themselves, danger to others, reporting child abuse or reporting elder abuse, so much of our job as a therapist is to help that person with their self-determination. And as a parent, before I realized that, it was difficult for me in trying to raise our children, have them follow a certain path. What I found freeing for myself, again, absent they're doing something harmful for themselves, but recognizing the value of self-determination for them. Striving for an atmosphere of cooperation, listen carefully. That can be difficult, especially when we care about the person. That's why as a therapist, I'm not allowed to treat my family. My family probably wouldn't want me to treat them anyways. They know too much about me, right? Striving to resume some normal activities, right? Some sort of sense of normalcy, but not pushing them too hard. Again, these are from the NAMI California .org website. Next slide, please. A few more things that we can do. Take steps to keep yourself and them safe and being prepared for a crisis. Those things can go hand in hand. When I would speak on the other module, talking about the things that we can do ahead of time to try to keep them safe. If a person really is out of control, making sure we're removing ourselves from that situation so we're not putting ourselves at risk. And then planning, maybe at a point when your loved one is doing okay, talking, maybe when you're able to talk about an incident that happened, hey, given what happened last time, what do you think we can do to make things go better next time? Not giving up, finding support for yourself, what we've been talking about, NAMI, Tri-Valley Crisis Support Services, FERC, and again, being careful to take care of ourselves. Next slide, please. Okay, actions that help you: sleep, diet, and exercise. If there's nothing else that we can do for ourselves, trying to get a good night's sleep, trying to watch what we eat, and trying to get out for some sort of physical activity. Very important to do. These seem like maybe something that everyone knows, but I find even for myself, I'm sure I'm the only one, but our son had to have surgery. So we were busy caring for him, maybe getting 4 hours of sleep, 3-4 hours of sleep for a few nights. And do you think maybe after a few nights of that, I probably wasn't my best self after a while? Sleep is so important for us. Taking care of ourselves, watching out for that harmful behavior, right? Being careful with alcohol or other substances. And then exercise, even if you can just get outside, taking a walk might be difficult, because if you have a loved one who you're concerned about, we may be less inclined to get outside to take care of ourselves. But those types of things are really important. Maybe taking a team approach to that too. And any type of exercise, doesn't have to be training for a marathon. It could be just getting out and moving around. When I work with clients with depression, we talk about behavioral activation, just a fancy word for getting out and doing something different, going for a drive, going for a walk, finding people to connect with. All right, next slide. Other actions that help us, some of these have been talked about already: making connections, getting that support, self-compassion, very, very important. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on in the presentation, but not expecting perfection from ourselves, right? We can get these negative thoughts. We can have this black or white thinking for ourselves. I should, I shouldn't, I can't. But recognizing we can only do so much. Seeing your doctor, taking care of our physical health is very important, especially the older we get. Getting into to see a doctor every year or two for a physical is very important. Respite, right? Maybe finding a way to maybe tapping into some resources or other family members or support people that can help to take over, so that we can just have that time for ourselves. Like Lynn had talked about, like with our cell phones, right? Those little chimes go off, and then feeling like we can't ever relax. It really creates a chronic stress, and that can be very, very, very difficult for us. Tapping into those resources. One thing, when I work with clients with trauma or anxiety, one of the things that's helpful is finding a way for us to feel more safe, some more control, some more predictability, more connection to others. Now, that might seem counter to what I talked about earlier, right? Recognizing support is not control. That's for others, but for ourselves, right? What can we do to feel a little safer? What can we do to feel like we have a little bit more control in our life? It doesn't have to be a whole lot. There's this concept of an upward spiral. Small changes can not only bring us on a downward spiral, but if we can just make some small changes in our lives to give us that, it can start us on this upward spiral as well. Raise your hand if anyone's ever heard of this book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Anybody read that or seen the video? It's excellent. If you haven't had a chance, look, it's about an hour and a half YouTube by Professor Sapolsky. think that's how he pronounces it. He's an endocrinologist, and he talks about the role of chronic stress in our lives and the impact it has. And I really can't think of too many things more stressful than spending many waking hours and hours when you should be sleeping, worried about a loved one and what they're going to do. So it's a great video. If you haven't have an hour and a half, he's a fantastic speaker. He's got a lot of humor, brings a lot of science into it. But yeah, it's if you're like me, you know, I'm Scottish, too cheap to buy the book. I watch a free YouTube presentation in an hour and a half, and you really get a lot of good information. Let me just take a moment here. If you want to put anything in the chat, or if anyone wants to unmute or raise your hand, any other ideas that some of you may have found helpful for yourself? This is why I love Zoom. There's like this radio silence out there. Anyone?
I'm gonna,
Oh, yes.
go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Mark, you go.
Oh, a sense of self-expression. Having something at the end of the day that you can look at and say, I created that. I have an effect on the world. I can do something.
That's great, Mark. Can you give me an example of something that you've done that you've...
We turned our swimming pool into a garden.
Oh, that's a lot of dirt you must have had to fill in there.
Yes, it was. And, you know, I've got hot peppers and eggplant and zucchinis and tomatoes and all sorts of different things coming up out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to grow tomatoes. A lot of other things. I live out here in Pleasanton, so the summer heat tends to kill, other than tomatoes and zucchini, but everything else tends to wither. Awesome. Yeah. Some sort of self-expression. I've done this, some sense of, gives us that sense of agency, right? That sense of, you know, having some impact on the world or on our lives. So thank you. Next, anyone else?
I was going to jump in with a quick comment about close friends, family or friends, okay? I know there's organizations out there, and I know there's tremendous stigma tied to mental illness, but we all click with certain people. And there are some friends that may not even understand about mental health. And I have few people that they keep telling me they learn so much through this, and, you know, from me, and they're good listeners. Find those people for yourself, you know, and those are important. That
is tremendously important. You know, they call therapy the talking cure. And hundreds of years ago, they didn't have a licensing process. You found trusted people who you could confide in. I was saying just before the presentation, as a therapist, 80% of my success in therapy is the relationship that a client and I develop and the sense of hope that they have for therapy. Only 15%, this common factors model, only 15% is any sort of technique that I use. So that is such a good point. And having people who you can trust, right? That's important, that sense of confidentiality, sense of understanding, acceptance. Oh my gosh, you know. It's great advice.
And just to add one thing, you got to develop those relationships. Sometimes as we get older, we lose people, we lose connections, right? We have to foster those relationships. They don't happen overnight.
That's so true. That, like, going back a couple of slides when we talk about, you know, coming up with a plan and that plan for ourselves. Who are a few people that I can really call on? Yeah. Thank you.
We have some friends through our church, and we went camping, so we share that, and in that we learned that we have so much in common, and they're the ones who guided us towards NAMI, but we also have them, you know, they understand because they go through a lot of the same things that we do, and it's been a lifesaver for my husband and I. So
the getting out and doing things with people like camping, unless you're not a camper. For some of us, you know, getting
well, we have an RV, so that makes it glamping.
Yeah.
Glamping.
We have a trailer, and we have a pillow that says, "Sorry for what I said when I was backing in the camper." Great. How about one more idea?
I'd like to
Jeff,
chime
please.
in. When I get calls from parents often reaching out for their child because their child maybe isn't quite ready yet, or they're just looking for resources for themselves, I always empathize with the fact that it's scary. Who do you know who it's safe with to share the fact that somebody in your family has mental illness? Is it your neighbor? Is it a family member? Is it a coworker? It can all backfire on you, and you can't unsay it. That's
Yes.
why I say NAMI provides you a safe place where everybody who's there, you know why you're there. You don't have to worry about disclosing, and everybody there gets it. And that way you can go and safely share feelings you might be embarrassed to admit to and realize you're not the only ones having them. In fact, most of the people do. So I say this is a place you can go to build a support system for yourself. And it's safe, it's there, it's available, and people will understand what you're going through.
There's a voice of wisdom right there, Jeff. Thank you. Yeah, that is so true. We have an emotional connection to people that are close to us, and you're right. Sometimes something might be well intentioned, but it just really doesn't come across, as helpful as we had hoped. So, so have a chat message. Maybe go down here.
One of the things about intentions with mental illness is they can be good intentions, but you have to focus more on the outcomes, regardless of what the intentions are. We all know about that road to hell, right?
Right.
Pay with good intentions.
Right. And as I tell clients, any progress, just a little bit of progress, even going from scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being most severe symptoms, even going from a 9 to an 8, that's some sort of progress, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
then
these programs always talk about baby steps, which I don't like. If you want to say small steps, say small steps. Baby steps to me infantilizes the effort and the level. Isn't it important the direction of the step and not the size of the step?
Right. Yeah. Some small positive step. Right. Yeah. Janet V, you sent a chat that it comforts me to contribute to research projects to learn about mental illness. Yeah, to take this, what is the meaning behind this experience I'm going through, right? We can get so caught up in the why versus asking what now? What can happen from this? What possible good? Sometimes that's hard to see, especially when we're in the midst of a crisis. But looking back in reflection, hey, through this process, I was able to do this, or we were able to make an impact in this area. Great, good, thank you. Some hundreds of years of wisdom and experience sitting on this. Some of us more on the higher side of 100 than others. So. Next slide, please. All right, so okay, but if you were my therapist, right? I'm not your therapist. Okay, but if you were my therapist, I love what Carl Jung said, right? We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. And we can think that maybe this is going out towards others, but for ourselves as well too, right? If we don't have self-acceptance, it can really be an anchor for us. Accepting, right? When I work with clients with shame, the only real antidote for shame is accepting of the mistakes we've made and accepting of our situation. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to agree with it, right? But to at least accept it. Hey, I'm not perfect. But just because one part of me might not feel perfect doesn't mean all of it is condemned. So, next slide, please. All right. So how therapy can help? I like to use cognitive behavior therapy with my clients. I find it helpful for me. So it's not the only approach I use. I'll use what's called internal family systems. I like that because that talks about what I just said. We have these parts of ourselves. So you're a caregiver. You're a person who cares about this person, and that's a difficult thing. But you have other parts of yourselves to develop too, like what Mark had said. Hey, I like to garden. I like to paint. I like to do home improvement. I like to visit with friends. I like to volunteer. So it's when we start to have one adverse circumstance in our life define who we are is where that can start us on a downward spiral. And that's where the participant talked about talking with other people. Other people can be a good reflection because we do tend to be our worst critics. All right, so let's talk a little bit about anxiety. All right, again, what could be any more anxiety producing than always worried about a loved one? We've all got this fight or flight response, and when we learn about that, we tend to think about, the saber-toothed tiger comes after the cave person and they have their club and they're either going to run or they're going to fight the saber-toothed tiger. But really anything that's emotionally threatening to us, it can trigger our fight or flight response. It can trigger this anxiety. It's a normal response. It just doesn't feel normal. But we have anxiety about things that are important to us. So we have a loved one that we're worried about hurting themselves, or we're worried about our circumstances. We talked a lot about the psychosocial aspects affecting us. We have anxiety about these things that matter to us. There's a saying, we tend to have depression about the past. We tend to have anxiety about our future. That fight or flight part of ourselves, that triggers about 3 times faster than the thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, about 3 times faster. Can someone tell me why you think your fight or flight might trigger faster than your reasoning ability?
I think it used to be just survival before we were evolving.
Right. Yeah. If you've ever been crossing the street and one of these less than helpful people are not paying attention and the car's coming for you, do you have to spend time thinking about, gee, maybe I need to move out of the way of this vehicle? Or does your body just react? Your body reacts, right? What are some of the physical symptoms of anxiety, this fight or flight that triggers? Some volunteers here. Or maybe I'm the only one that deals with anxiety, and if that's the case.
Increased heart rate.
Yes, increased heart rate. And why is that?
Need
What?
more blood to your brain to think.
Yes, more blood to our brain, more blood to our muscles, to our lungs, getting ready to act, right? Yeah, very good. Yeah. Another physical symptom of anxiety, anybody? Hearing the words IRS. Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, someone's going to say something. Sweating. Yeah, right. Perspiration. Your body's already physically working. The problem with anxiety, as opposed to having a good workout, going for a walk or doing some sort of manual labor, is you can attribute that sweating. Well, yeah, it's 100 degrees out and I decided to do gardening. Of course I'm sweating. But when we're sitting alone with our anxiety, we tend to think that there's something wrong, versus our body, this autonomic response, is doing what it's designed to do, just not feeling helpful at the moment. How about two more physical symptoms of
breathing, having a hard time catching your breath, or
yeah, and again, why is our body wanting to breathe more?
Get more oxygen to the muscle.
Exactly, preparing for action. Right? Yeah, very good. And one more physical symptom of anxiety.
You're flushed from the adrenaline.
Yes, adrenaline, again, preparing us for that fight or flight. Actually, fight, flight, or freeze. Right? Our body recognizes a threat. If we didn't have these responses, we probably wouldn't be around on this earth for too long, right? I mean, if I'm walking across Hop Yard Road in Plenty and a car is coming and I don't have anxiety about this threat, I'm probably not going to make it over to In-N-Out to get my double. So, which might be better self-preservation anyway. Our body does these things naturally. The problem is when we're not aware of what's going on, or maybe we're thinking I should just be able to handle it. Whatever those thoughts that we get, if we're not honest with ourselves and we're not able to attribute it, not careful, that anxiety can either be debilitating or we can do things to start to avoid the anxiety. When we experience anxiety, the the goal when I work with folks in therapy, it's not to not have anxiety. Like when I talk about a scale of 1 to 10 with your anxiety, I would love to be able to get you down to a 1, but I can't do that for myself. So how can I help you do that? But the goal is to get us to maybe down to around a 4 or a 5. Because if we're able to get our anxiety down from saying 8 to a 4 to a 5, what can start to happen for us? What good thing can start to happen in them?
Our heart rates will decrease,
Yes.
will maintain a normal pace. Our
Yeah,
breathing will be at ease.
yeah,
Our overall bodies, our circulations and systems, cardiovascular systems cooperate.
yes.
Um,
And then with that, what happens to our thought process?
Thought process, yeah.
Our thought process,
will come in place, calm,
right? You know,
allow us to reason.
yes,
thoughtfully.
yes, stimulate rational thought, right? Yeah. We can have the best plan for a crisis, but if we're up in an 8 or a 9, rational thought's not happening, because that survival mode is kicking in. And the survival mode is it's worried about the physical needs, worried about our body. We can revert to automatic behavior. But if we have this list, if we have this plan, if we have these good thinking coping skills, what we want to do first is to learn how to bring down our anxiety. So early warning signs, physical symptoms, thoughts, catastrophizing. Does anybody wish to share either for yourselves or someone you know what might be some of these kind of ideas? I'm really careful with the term irrational thoughts, because these thoughts for us, when I work with clients, I tell them somewhere there's probably a good intention with that thought. Like if I'm out driving and I'm thinking there's a lot of knucklehead drivers out there, that's not the most positive thought, but the goal is, the good intention is to keep me safe, to be aware, because there are some bad threatening drivers out there. If you haven't figured out, I struggle with road rage sometimes, but hey, that's for But what might be some thoughts that we can start to have about ourselves, either for ourselves or our loved ones, when we're struggling with our situation?
Well, for people like me with diagnosis, there's something called the RAP plan, Wellness Recovery Action Plan.
Right. Yes.
In a nutshell, it's like you write down how you do, how you look when you're doing well. Then you write down how you look when you know you're not doing so well. And then you come up with a plan of action while you're thinking clearly. So when your symptoms start to take over and you realize it, you don't have to rely on your brain that's not your friend at the moment to come up with a plan. It's already written down, and you go to it and look at it, and then you can sort of regroup and say, that's right, I'm going to call this person, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, because that's not the time to come up with a plan B, like you said.
Right.
You're not going to come up with a good, you're going to revert to old behavior.
Right.
And that's part of the problem, is your old behavior. So that's my contribution.
No, thank you. Yeah. Early warning signs, thoughts or feelings. Any, would you mind sharing, or anyone, maybe like for myself, my family knows to kind of stay away from me. I get this look on my face and I get really quiet. And I'm like starting to withdraw. So my family knows that's kind of my early warning sign. I'm a better dad and a husband when I can get the dog out for a 20-minute walk down to the park and come home, if I remember to do that, like what you're saying. But yeah, that's kind of my early warning sign from when I'm starting to not be in a very good place. Any other early warning signs for folks that they might want to share?
I'd like to share something
Sure.
because I've had many years of anxiety disorder.
Okay.
And this is to share to the world what I do when I start having those feelings coming on. I do a self-assessment, and just to make sure it's nothing that's any other health issue that might be, and that I'm not aware of, however.
Good. Yes.
And then I rub my stomach.
Okay.
Because there is a correlation between gut and anxiety disorder.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your digestive system is getting ready to get rid of this stuff because it needs to move faster, it needs to do something. Absolutely. Yeah, physical symptoms, early warning signs, very, very good things to be attuned to. Yeah. Thank you, Marcia. Yeah.
I'm going to follow Marcia and by saying whenever I see anxiety settling in, especially I work in high tech and having to deal with family, I notice that I get frazzled, right? I
Yeah.
lose things. I'm like, all of a sudden, oh, I got to stop and breathe and whatever it takes. So deep breath. And I've been doing this a couple of years. Not that it solves our problems, but it helps us slow down. It helps me slow down, I should say.
Yeah, that frazzle, given what we're talking about, what's happening? Cognitive functions getting better or not quite as good?
Right. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to stop and laugh at yourself. I'm taking Marcia's advice. I'm going to stop, breathe, then I'm going to rub my belly, and then I'm going to laugh. And I'm going to say, okay,
Yeah.
that before I can change the world, I have to settle down myself.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, true. I try to laugh at myself, but my family does plenty of that for me. So, but yeah, that's that. It doesn't feel good, but if we can attribute it, hey, wait a second, I'm having some anxiety. I am dealing with this, and that makes sense to kind of normalize it, right? Yeah. Instead of thinking, Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He had this great saying, that which we resist persists, right? If we resist it, it's going to stick with us, right? That's why if I have a client that's struggling with sleeping, or for myself, I'm having a hard time sleeping, I tell myself, I need to stay awake, Brian, don't fall asleep, stay awake. Because sometimes doing that opposite, it takes away that resistance. So, but some great coping skills like what I have on here. You folks are already talking about four count breathing, right? For some reason, breathing in through our nose is more helpful than breathing out through our mouth. So breathing in through our nose, holding it for 4, or if you're getting older like me, maybe holding it for 2 if I'm lucky, and then letting out for 4. Grounding techniques. Grounding technique is anything that makes us curious. Like I'll tell someone, if you're starting to experience a lot of anxiety, try counting backwards from 100 by 7. Now my son's an engineer, so he's too good with numbers. So with him, I have to, hey, count backwards from 1,000 by 17. But what do you think is happening if we're making ourselves think about something?
You're taking the focus from the anxiety to the task at hand.
Yes, you're creating curiosity. Anxiety or trauma also. Anxiety and curiosity cannot coexist. So we want to do things to make us curious. That's why reading a good book can be really helpful. That's why we say taking our mind off of things, right? But anything to stimulate that curiosity. Yeah, you can research grounding techniques. If you're working with a therapist, maybe try out some other grounding techniques out there. But anything that gets you thinking about something else. PMR is short for progressive muscle relaxation, right? So it's kind of a physical grounding technique, but it's basically tightening and untightening, starting with our feet and our calves, our thighs, all the way up to our stomach, to our chest. Many of you probably do this. This can be helpful if we're having a hard time sleeping, is really tensing up and breathing, and then letting ourselves relax. Because again, that anxiety, we're like a coiled spring, and that energy needs to be released. Any other coping skills out there that folks have found helpful?
Set a time for girls' night out or men's night out or whatever
Yes.
it is. Don't forget yourself. It doesn't have to be every day. Every quarter, you have something to look forward to. Yes,
that is so true. Friendships, if you're in a relationship, setting aside that time to have some date time, right? To get out of that environment, doing something different. Yeah. Great idea. Any others?
Mine is just praying and asking God to take away the anxiety.
Yes, Yes, prayer, spirituality can be such a strength for us. And actually, when I'm working with a client, knowing if they do have a faith or any sort of spirituality, a way to help them cope, right? Some sort of higher power, some sort of thing beyond themselves, to help us deal with what's going on. And then, oh, I'm sorry, if you could go back to that other one there. And seeking out professional help if you're experiencing marked distress. So just to talk about this a little bit, stress isn't always bad, and stress is a natural part of life. But if it starts to interfere with our interpersonal relationships, with our what we call our activities of daily living, right? Being able to cope day to day, it's very helpful to talk to a professional. Many of the people that I work with, we work with what's called an adjustment disorder, right? Just because you're feeling anxiety or depression about a situation doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. I read a statistic that says 40% of us, I think it's higher, 40% of us are going to deal with a mental health condition in our lifetime. But I can't think of anyone in their lifetime that's not going to be coping with difficulty adjusting to a situation. And again, I can think of very few things more stressful than worrying about a loved one that might be hurting themselves or hurting somebody else. So if it's causing you a lot of marked distress, please be sure to seek out some professional help. I've had clients, I've seen them for several years. I've had clients that they come for 4 or 5 sessions and they get some coping skills and then they're good. It really depends upon what you're looking for therapy. All right, next slide, please. And again, about that shame and guilt, acceptance, self-compassion, boundaries, right? Boundaries are good things for all of us to be mindful of. Being responsible to others, but we're not responsible for their happiness. Now we want to make sure that we're not contributing to their unhappiness, but not seeing ourselves as completely responsible for other people. We're responsible to somebody's looking for some help, looking for some support, doing what we can to get them some help, some support, some assistance, but being careful not to seeing ourselves as responsible for that person's actions. This was mentioned before in a previous lecture. Yeah, third person. What would a trusted friend tell you? I can't tell you the number of clients that I have that they beat themselves up about things, and then I'll ask them, "Who's your best friend?" So and so. What would so and so say about you? And that trusted friend would have so much more compassion than we would have for ourselves. It's not an abnormal thing to do, but catching ourselves and being careful not to be too hard on ourselves. So, how am I doing for a time, Marcia?
You've got over 15 minutes.
Oh, great, good. All right. So, shame and guilt. Any other thoughts? What have some of you done to kind of help to give yourself a little more self-compassion, a little more understanding for yourself and coping with your situation?
Well, as a consumer and trying to help other consumers and family members, I've always encouraged my peers to take ownership of your behavior, but don't ever blame yourself or shame yourself, feel guilty about it. But you do have to accept it and acknowledge it and just say that I'm doing the best I can. And that's all you owe yourself, and it's all you owe the other people, is to do the best you can. We can't predict how well we're going to do in our efforts. And but in denial, like you said, if you won't, you're not going to be able to let go of it and get through it if you resist it.
Yes.
So it's hard. It's a bitter pill to swallow because it hurts your self-esteem and it hurts your ego. And we're already having problems with our self-worth when we have a diagnosis. So, and it's hard for the loved ones to see us go through it. And they're even more frustrated because they realize they're pretty powerless to get us to see what we're not willing to see.
Yes. Yeah.
Like shame, blame, and guilt have no place in it. Like they don't help.
Right. Jeff, thank you so much. Yeah, doing the best I can. There's this concept when I work with parents, or actually for myself as a parent, there's this good enough parenting, right? Hey, what I'm doing, it may not be perfect, but can I just tell myself that I'm doing good enough right now? Absent, doing something harmful to others, right? But doing the best I can, and recognize that I'm not perfect and I'm going to fall short, and I'm not always going to be able to live up to this absolute must all the time standard. When I work with clients, we talk about this all or nothing thinking, this dichotomous thinking. I should, I have to, I can't, versus being willing to maybe try to live in the middle and be more accepting of ourselves towards the middle a little bit more. Yeah. One other thought from anyone on that before we move on? I like this saying down at the bottom. This is actually, we have the holidays coming up, so this is a real helpful saying when we have to get together with some family members and just doing our best. If someone wants to draw us into their problem, draw us into their misery loves company, I'm going to make you miserable too, is telling ourselves, don't get on the ride. Try not to get on that ride. I'll be responsible too, but I'm not going to let myself feel like I'm responsible for all these things with this person. So, next slide, please. All right, so I want to read you a little story here, the story of Joshua Speed. It's how one person can make a difference in someone's life. Joshua Speed became a friend of the man who had been born 5 years earlier. This man was 2 or 3 years old when his baby brother Thomas died. At age 9, his mother, great aunt, and uncle all died within the same 2-week period of time of milk sickness. After his mother's death, the man was raised by his older sister, Sarah. When the man was 19, Sarah died. Gosh, this is sad. Then at age 26, one of his best friends died as well. Years later, no surprise here, the man experienced 6 months of severe depression. His friends were so concerned that they removed all razors, knives, pistols, etc. from his room and presence because they feared he might attempt suicide. The man described himself as the most miserable man living. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or get better. His friend, Joshua Speed, stayed with him constantly during this time. It was only after 6 months, when Speed needed to attend his own father's funeral, which involved several days of travel, that the man said he felt okay enough for Speed to go to the funeral alone. Next slide, please. While most of us may not know who Joshua Speed was, the person whose life he helped to save is someone we all know very well. His friendship with our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, seems to have helped save Lincoln's life. Lincoln faced many more struggles in his life, as we all will, including the death of one of his sons and the Civil War. But there is no indication that he ever suffered from that degree of severe depression again, or was ever again suicide. This story is presented to help remind us that one person can make a difference, each of you, and that the person that is helped by our care and concern may very well go on to help others, or even to do something important to help others. If you're interested in reading more about this at the Institute for Health and Recovery, that's where I was able to pull this. I just love this story. I mean, you think about, boy, just the crushing blows that he had go on, but you never hear about the social support, the connections that Lincoln had, and that's so important for us to remember. Even when we feel, are we doing anything? If we just show up, when I work with folks with trauma tends to be experienced alone. And one of the approaches I take when I'm working with folks with trauma is the connection, the help of other relationships, so you can link arms with someone and face what you're dealing with. I suppose if we live for 200 years, we'll be able to heal from the things that happened to us, but that's not going to happen, right? So it's learning how to cope and having those other people to come alongside of us so that we don't feel like we're alone. So love that story. Next slide, please. Okay, can anyone name this movie? if you can name the movie, you get an extra 5 minutes on your break. Mark's laughing.
Princess Bride.
Very good. Mark, you get an extra 5 minutes. Let me explain. There was too much. Let me say it. Inigo Montoya. You know, Norman Cousins wrote an article years ago. It's called "Anatomy of an Illness," and I'm not saying watch a funny movie is going to make our lives better, right? But there was a person that had a real serious chronic physical illness, and he had read where humor can be helpful. So he forced himself to watch a lot of funny, humorous, slapstick kind of movies. And did it completely cure him? No, but it really helped with his symptoms. So finding things that can give us some joy, give us some happiness, right? Even if it's old corny Bugs Bunny cartoons, you know, something to give our mind a mental break. Because when we laugh, when we're able to find joy in something, it really changes us, changes our mental state, but it changes our physical state too. There's all kinds of, you know, like hormones like oxytocin, right? That get released when we're able to connect with others, things that are helpful. So in conclusion, we talked a bit about why self-care is important, how we can help others, and how we can help ourselves. Helping others is important because we do want to feel like we're able to do things for other people. So I know there was a lot of information in the slideshow, but it is being recorded, thank goodness. So if I skipped over anything, you're welcome to go back. Got a few minutes left. Are there any questions? No one fell asleep. That's good. Or actually, the people that fell asleep are the ones that don't have their video going. That's the old Zoom trick. That's, oh, someone just turned on their video. She woke up. Just kidding. Just kidding. Any questions for me or any other thoughts too? Because this is just such a great group. I mean, to show up here on a Saturday to share with others and to go through this together. Self-care. Any other things that folks have found helpful?
So Brian, I personally am very grateful for you writing up and presenting on self-care, because there's so many different ways to look at it, but I think you hit it right on for families. And okay, there's Peggy. Thank you.
Very welcome, Peggy.
But yeah, this is something we so easily forget when we're caught up in the middle of either a crisis situation with a loved one or just even personal stuff, and that it's easy. At least I find it easy just to completely throw it out the window, and then I have to stop.
Yes. Yeah. I'm my own worst therapist many times, trust me.
I'm my own worst enemy. Yeah.
I just
Brian?
Go
ahead.
I just wanted to say, as far as genders go, I've noticed women are wired to put everybody else first. So it's especially hard for them to understand the value of self-care, or even what that looks like in a healthy way. Men, not as much. It's just kind of it's how we're raised, it's how society teaches us, and it gets reinforced. And those are the role models we see growing up, various genders. So, you know, what I have found is in the peer support community, Mark and you are like two of the only ones I see around who are guys. Most of the others are clinicians, and you're a clinician. It doesn't come naturally to them. And they may have their heart in the right place, but I've seen them eventually wear out because it's not authentically who they are. And that's okay, as long as they understand that. But, you know, then the women are there to pick up the slack, and that is really hard. You know, it puts an extra burden on them. They often don't have partners. And it's hard enough being a single mom in our society as it is without having a single mom with a child who has special needs.
Yeah,
and where do you go for help?
Women tend to be more prone to heart attacks because it's not always acted upon because you're putting yourself second. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah. I always tell my clients, we as men tend to typically die sooner because we don't talk about our problems. I mean, it's important to talk about this stuff. Yeah,
It is.
kind of normalize it.
Brian, could you go a little bit into how guilt fights any inclination to get self-care?
Well, yeah. Anyone here
Morning.
ever think that it's all upon us, or we should be doing more, or I should have all the answers? Yeah, right. Yeah. Guilt's a killer. It really is. Right. Now, again, we don't want to label it as bad, right? Somewhere that guilt's got a good intention. Right? What might be a good intention of guilt? Except from our moms, of course.
To get us to actually do something we know is required of us, or we're responsible for, or something. To put down that video game and actually go do the dishes or something.
Yeah. Like, gee, Brian, you put on 20 pounds. We need to go out and you should feel guilty about binge watching Better Call Saul, right? You need to get out and do something. Right. Yeah. So that can be, if we pay attention to it, if we channel it for something good, right? One of my favorite sayings for therapy is, if it's not working, do something different. If it is working, do more of that, right? Absent that's something that's healthy to do, right? But yeah, guilt's really bad. And I was just kidding about the mom joke. My mom's actually still alive, 78. I'm still afraid of her, so don't tell her I said that.
It'll only be on YouTube. You know?
That's right. You don't have to worry. She doesn't use YouTube, does she?
Yeah.
I know my mom didn't.
This is my first and last time presenting on self-care for NAMI tripod. No,
I'm going to jump in with a comment here on self-care. I've tried for some time just to do the activities, right? We talk about these are the things you can do. But to me, self-care starts here. It's mental before it's physical. If I don't accept, the best thing that I heard here that confirms it, right? It says self-care is not being selfish. And we women are raised to think you got to do all this for everyone. If I don't accept that statement, and if I don't mentally accept this and let go a little bit and set the boundaries, everything else, I do the activities, but it's not the same. When you're anxious, it's like the color is gone. Everything is black and white. And then the depression is like even black and white is gone, right? So it's the levels of things. And I've been studying this to help my son. Now I'm experiencing it because I've been submerged in this. It becomes trauma whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's that self-acceptance, allowing ourselves to do this for ourselves. Because really, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we had a saying, I know I've got about 2 minutes left. We had a saying in law enforcement, are you fit for duty, right? When you look at some of these things that happen in these tragic incidents, that person for some reason wasn't really fit for duty. And if we're not fit for duty to help people, we may be doing more harm than good. We talked about lashing out, frustration, right? But yeah, getting past that mental block. I should do more. I have to do more. It's not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing good enough. And maybe taking those extremes and letting ourselves come back in the middle of it more. So.
Yeah, we say don't should on yourself.
Yes.
And my mom, I have to, as much as I loved my mom, Arlene, she raised us to believe that selfish was always bad.
Yeah.
And I went to a therapist. She said, no, self-centered maybe, but selfish is very healthy at times because an empty well cannot nourish anybody.
Yes,
so you can't be there. I always tell parents that you need to practice self-care. If your kid's not ready yet, you need to be there for them when they do come out the other side. Otherwise, you're not helping anybody. Martyrdom, even if it's well-intended, doesn't benefit anybody.
Right.
But I understand the temptation.
Right.
I did it a little myself.
It's got a good intention in there. We just have to be careful to not that become the absolute for us. Yeah.
Moderation.
Last question. Someone asked me where my practice is. I was until recently with a community Presbyterian counseling center. I'm actually taking a bit of a sabbatical, but I'm thinking of going into practice for myself. But I will give you my email address on the very last slide. And my phone number too. So if you have any other questions or just want to call up to chat or send me an email, you're welcome to do that. So. Inigo Montoya. There we are. Yeah, so first responder therapist at gmail.com, and there's my phone number, 925-268-8083. So thank you for being attentive. Thank you for for at least muting the audio so I didn't hear your snoring when you were when I was putting you to sleep during and Marcia, again, thank you so much for letting me present. It's always a privilege. I so appreciate what NAMI Tri-Valley crisis support services, crisis response, all the organizations out there that really help to fill in the gaps for people that need it. So I really appreciate it. So.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to throw a plug towards NAMI Alameda County as well, as they were very instrumental in this. So it's good to have good community, partnering up. So we're very grateful that you were able to come and make us feel good. Okay. Love it. Okay, thank you, Brian, very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And next we have Jeff Kiola. Did I pronounce that right, Jeff? Oops, I think you're mute. You're mute.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So Jeff, 18 years in recovery, has provided crisis intervention training, presentations for 9 years. He's on the board of directors for NAMI Alameda County and a speaker for NAMI East Bay family to family classes, as well as Contra Costa County college undergraduate nursing students. He's an administrator for the online support group Families Affected by Mental Illness through Facebook. Jeff is a consumer speaker to the Family Advocates for the Family Education and Resource Center. In 2016, Jeff received the City of Berkeley Mental Health Consumer Advocate of the Year Award, and in 2019, an award from FERC for his years of service in doing CIT. He is a consumer advocate of the Mental Health Services Act Stakeholders Committee, and he now fields phone calls from the San Francisco Depression Bipolar Support Alliance chapter and is available to provide support 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And later, if needed, to the mental health community at large. He helps people navigate the system, both families and friends, and points them in the direction of resources that are out there, and sometimes more importantly, provides them with an empathetic ear. With no time limit, and as long as it takes, Jeff has the time. And he always answers his phone. Unheard of, right? But Jeff, I answer the NAMI Tri-Valley phone too. So that's we're two out there in the universe. Yeah. Doing this work is his passion, his meaning and purpose, which was something he didn't have when he attempted to take his life. He will share that experience with you and what led up to it, as well as his recovery story. And of which you can tell has gone quite well. He loves what he does, including sharing his story with you. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to start out by reading something that I found. It's a quote. I'm going to end with another quote from my mother. This one is not from my mom, but it's from Baba Amte. It says, "I don't want to be a great leader. I want to be a man who goes around with a little oil can, and when he sees a breakdown, offers his help. To me, that man who does that is greater than any holy man. The mechanic with the oil can. That is my ideal in life." That's what I've been doing for 17, 18 years now, since I first got diagnosed at 54. I'm 72 now. I was what they call late diagnosis. My diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I was high functioning. I grew up in a nice suburb without any trauma, no police activity, lots of advantages in my life, good education, all kinds of things that really went well for me. But I worked 35 years straight, did really well until at age 53, I lost my job. I got downsized. I had never been fired from a job in my life. I never got kicked out of an apartment, and I never got in trouble with the law, which is one reason why I never got diagnosed. I was under everybody's radar. What was there to diagnose? And Brian was talking about, some of our symptoms, when the stress gets to us and our symptoms rise to the level where they interfere with our daily life, that's when we might get diagnosed. A lot of people never get diagnosed if they have other coping mechanisms. Well, at 54, my hypomania was taken care of by going to a job 40 hours a week. And when I wasn't working, I was doing constant activity, Energizer Bunny. As long as I was moving, I felt fine. Sitting still, that was a different story. Now, that kept me physically fit and it made me very productive, but it's not very good for self-reflection. When you can't slow your brain down from 160, it's hard to reflect. You have racing thoughts. Racing thoughts result in pressured speech. And if you don't have an outlet for it, it's very uncomfortable for the people who are on the receiving end. I did not understand that because you cannot step outside of yourself and hear how you sound to the rest of the world. I'm articulate. I have good vocabulary. I have good thought processes. So I thought I was communicating really well until I went to a therapist at age 32 for family and relationship issues, not my mental illness. And I heard how I sounded on the tape recorder. It was more devastating to my ego than my suicide attempt was, because that was planned. This was out of the blue. I could not believe that's how I'd been sounding for the first 32 years of my life. I was crushed. Luckily, I was able to say to myself, well, can't go back and change any of that. So I'll just have to try not to do it anymore. Well, the emphasis is on try, even though I was aware of it. What I didn't understand was it was not voluntary behavior at that point. It was compulsive behavior driven by my symptoms. Who knew? And if I had known how other people were receiving me, I would have tried to do something about it. But until I actually got medicated, it wasn't really something I could have managed on my own. It wasn't a matter of willpower. Now, my content was always fine, but my delivery really sucked. So, like listening to music at a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, and somebody turns it up to 11, you want to leave the room. Now it's just noise. It's too intense. I had no modulation. I didn't realize that. The emotions I was sharing were accurate, but distorted. And that's why I was getting these bizarre looks from people over the years. I couldn't figure out, why are they looking at me like that? It just didn't compute, because I know what I just said, but I didn't know how I was saying. So if I had written it down and handed it to them, a lot of problems would have been solved, but I wasn't. I was verbalizing, and it was a torrent. It was uncomfortable after a while. Socially, people could walk away. In the workplace, they didn't always have that option. So sometimes it was uncomfortable. And after I got laid off my job at 53, I tried to find another job. Now, one of the things I did was work entry-level jobs in libraries for 25 years, reference desk, worked in architectural and engineering firms. All these things were low stress because they were low paying jobs, but I was a single man. I could get by on a modest salary. And I knew I didn't want stress in my life. So the jobs that I had in library settings are very therapeutic for somebody with hypomania, because you don't get sensory overload, which can be a trigger that can push you right up into mania, or so agitated in your hypomania that you're not able to stay in the office and function. So that was a very lucky happenstance for me. I've been very lucky throughout my mental health diagnosis and recovery. Timing has been good. Services have been good. I came into the system in 2004. Does everybody know what got passed in 2004? Mental Health Services Act. A whole lot more money came into the system. I didn't get waitlisted. I didn't fall through the cracks. I didn't decompensate even more while I waited in line to get services. Again, dumb luck. Just timing is so important, and you can't control timing. Just be grateful when you have good timing. And I got diagnosed after my 6 months of my only depression that I ever had. And it was a perfect storm. I was living paycheck to paycheck, couldn't find another job for the first time. Whereas my whole life, employers had been thrilled to have me because I would show up to work every day with my energy, showed up in a good mood, do a really good job for what they were paying me, and help everybody else in the office with their deadlines when I had the time. And I always had the time because I was more than qualified to do the level of work I was doing. So I got my work out of the way, and I would go around and ask people, how can I help them? Makes you very welcomed in the workplace. So most employers would say, and I wasn't asking for raises. Most employers would want 3 or 4 of me in their office. So I never had problems getting employed. But all of a sudden at 53, 54, when you don't have good computer skills, and you don't want to get them because you don't like computers, all of a sudden I had no marketable skills. Library skills for 25 years were obsolete in a matter of 3 years with computers. They went from libraries to cybraries. After a couple centuries of no change, I never saw that coming. I don't think many other people did either. But there I was without marketable job skills in my mid-50s, 10 years short of retirement age. And I didn't know what I was going to do. But most of all, I lost my last piece of social structure when I got laid off from my job. And after 40 or 50 resumes and getting not a single response, not even a rejection, my self-esteem that had been good my whole life just kept plummeting. I had a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. I started wondering if I had anything of value to offer anymore. I liked the person I saw in the mirror a little less each day. And that was hard because I'd never really gone through that experience before. And I just decided after 4 months of that, I didn't want to do this anymore. So I spent 2 months carefully planning my exit. It didn't work, even though it was pretty well thought out. I'm glad now it didn't work. It got me put into John George for a 72-hour hold. I was so lucky, again, that word, people look at me funny when I say I'm really lucky because they say, how do you think you're lucky? You have a mental illness. And I can explain to them. Mine's very treatable. Mine's very manageable. I went there and in 3 days, I had started to lift out of my depression because they gave me one pill called Zyprexa. And the doctor saw me on the 3rd day and he said, how are you doing? And I told him that to be very surly during the intake because I didn't like being 5150, even though it was not traumatic. Police did an excellent job. I was not in the middle of my symptoms 10 days after I attempted my suicide. So I had sort of regrouped and was planning my second attempt. And I went in not knowing what John George was. When they came to pick me up at my friend's house, they said, well, it's great you agreed to get help, but now we have to take you to John George. And my response was, okay. I guarantee you, no police ever heard anybody say, okay, when they were being told they were taken to John George. But ignorance was bliss. I didn't know what John George was. So I went. They didn't even put me in cuffs. They asked me, do we need to put you in cuffs? I said, no. So they let me walk out to the patrol car. Granted, it was in a locked parking area, so I couldn't flee very far, but they were respectful. That allowed me to enter the system without resentment, without anger, without a chip on my shoulder, without rage, without burning all these bridges, which you can't always repair because it goes into your permanent record. This is what you have when you have a mental health chart. Like when we were kids in school, they say, this is going on your permanent record. Well, when you have a mental health diagnosis, that's what your chart is. It's a permanent record of all your behavior from the time you were diagnosed and started getting services. And a lot of it's not very pretty. Maybe you're not stable during that point in time. Maybe you haven't found the right meds yet. Maybe there's other challenges and traumas that haven't been dealt with yet. But for me, I didn't have trauma in my childhood, so I was lucky. What I had was probably a chemical imbalance because as a premature baby, after I came out of the incubator, I was having convulsions and spasms they could not stop. I found out at age 38, my mother told me they put me on phenobarbital for a week. And I think that probably had something to do with my brain chemistry. Because once I got on the right med, which is the first one they tried, which was Depakote, again, I would not know how lucky I am if I had not been going to peer support groups for 17 years and hearing thousands, literally thousands of other people's stories about their medications and their experiences. Where else would I have learned about it? You don't talk about that stuff in public or with friends. You wouldn't get it anyway unless you're going through it. So I was very lucky. They got the right med for me the first time, and it happens to be an anticonvulsant, which makes sense to me because I think that's what was, in the beginning, probably what was causing this. I stabilized in a matter of months. And in terms of my energy level, it took about a year to adjust to sitting still because it wasn't normal for me. It felt weird. It didn't feel bad, it just felt weird. So I went to a homeless project after I got out of John George. I told my doctor on the third day, I said, if you want me to, I said, I'm doing better. If you want me to keep doing better, I need to get out of here today. Otherwise, I'll do worse. And he believed me. He released me. I spent 2 weeks at Woodrow Place. I got into a homeless project for 10 months, and then I got into Bonita House, dual diagnosed program. I've been here 17 years now. Housing is so critical for your wellness. If you don't have a safe and stable environment, it's like, one of the things Brian was talking about was sleep hygiene. My psychiatrist, when he gave me my diagnosis at 54, there was no resistance on my part. I didn't just accept it. I embraced it because a whole lot of stuff made more sense now. I didn't realize what I'd been up against. I always thought my brain was my best friend. Well, a lot of the times it is, but guess what? Some of the time it isn't. And I didn't blame myself for that. I didn't beat myself up for that. I didn't resent having this brain. I accepted it. That's the hand I got dealt. Maybe it ain't a full house. Maybe it's a pair of threes or, three of a kind, and I'll make it work. That's what I've done. I've made it work. Now, the other things I've had going for me was both my meds worked, and I had a lot of tools I brought to the table because of the successes I already had in my life. And I have a mom who was my trifecta. She had a mother who had schizoaffective disorder growing up and alcoholism. She worked as a psychiatric nurse at McLean Hospital, which is probably the preeminent psychiatric hospital in the country, for 30 years as a empty nester. And she's my mom. You can't get three better qualities in one phone call. And she was a person in my life that everybody needs, who can say the hard things you need to hear but don't want to hear. And it was invaluable. And she was my Sherpa. She helped me do all the heavy lifting and then knew when to step back and let me do it myself. So that was my ace in the hole. She passed away 3 years ago at 91. But as long as I get to keep doing this work, which is her legacy, because I'm only channeling her, that's all I'm doing. She's never left me. She's always with me. So anyway, excuse me. This is always the hardest presentation I do, but it also is the most rewarding. I ended up getting into Bonita House. I started working part-time. My psychiatrist, when I asked him, what do I do now that I have this diagnosis, he told me three things. Number one, you learn about your illness because it is manageable. Number two, you take the meds I find for you the way I tell you to take them. So med compliance is important. And the third thing he said is you need to get 8 hours regular sleep. If you don't, the first two won't even matter. He knew what he was talking about. And I have done very well. I got good housing. I had first 2 years were hard with 6 other housemates. Then I got moved to a place with 1 housemate, and it's a sanctuary. We get along really well. He has schizophrenia, but he's very compatible. And he's a nice guy. He's considerate, he's thoughtful, and I don't have to worry about any drama. So when I do all this work in the community, which is challenging, I love it, but it still it's taxing emotionally. I need a place to recharge my batteries, to practice my self-care, so I can be fully present for those who I'm helping. And I am. And I did 5 years as a peer support specialist part-time. I wrote over 5,000 notes because documentation is the necessary evil to get a paycheck in this field. Well, when I retired at 65, I decided I don't want another job at the county. I want to be a freelancer. I want to be an independent so I can devote my time to the person, and they are going to be the priority. I am fully present. I don't have to worry about turning the conversation into something I can write that Medi-Cal will approve. I don't have to try and steer the conversation. It's about them. It's not about me and me pleasing my boss and me feeling successful at my job. It's entirely about them. So there's no pressure on me. And I don't internalize their stuff. I learned to not do that. I absorb it, I process it, but I don't internalize. I incorporate their story into my familiarity with them because I talk to some of these people over and over again. And I'm a sponge. That's what I do. I soak up 15, 20,000 stories over the years. And I hope that when somebody says something to me, they're needing some sort of help, they poke that sponge in the right place and what they need comes out unfiltered in a way that might help them. And that's what I do. And I never get tired of it because it keeps re-energizing me. It helps my wellness. It makes my wellness stronger all the time. But again, I don't do it 40 hours a week. People say, how are you still doing this 17 hours, 17 years later? I said, well, number one, I never did it full time. Number two, I started later in life where I had a lot more wisdom and understanding. And I had my mom there to help me out. Just things like that, where I really had a lot of things in my favor and very little working against me. My mom was, as Brian was also talking about, the encouraging part. She always urged and encouraged me, but she never tried to steer me or take away my self-will or my self-determination. When I moved out here at 18, I was the first one of her kids to leave home, and I know it hurt her. I know, but she didn't make a scene. She let me go graciously, and I love her to this day for doing that. She's an amazingly strong woman. And, here I am across the country, and for 30 years, 35 years, she'd be talking to me on the phone, knowing that what I was telling her couldn't be true, because everything isn't always perfect in my life, but that's all I ever told her. I didn't share the bad stuff with her. And she'd get on me about that, say, why do you never tell me about the stuff? You only tell me about the good stuff. And finally, one day I said to her, well, Mom, where do you think I learned that from? Because that's the way she was raising us. We had a father who was, no, I won't get into that, but sociopath, narcissist, white collar criminal, not a good man to have in your family. And she would not ever say anything against him. She did not want to be the reason why we might turn on him. Again, this woman had integrity for days, and an incredible person. And so she let me find my own way, as much as it must have eaten at her, because all of the other 5 kids were there. She could keep an eye on them, but she put all of her worry eggs in one basket, and that was mine. And I kept on wanting to tell her, my life is working fine. I go to Europe. I've been in the Caribbean. I have a good life. I have a good job. I have good friends. But she knew that couldn't be the whole story. And the point was, if I had some bumps in the road, what was she going to do? Hop on a plane and fly out here and hold my hand at 32, as much as she might have wanted to. But eventually, once I got my diagnosis, she was, all ears. And the funny thing is, for years, she would say, everything I say to you goes in one ear and out the other. And I finally pointed out to her, Mom, nothing you ever said went in one ear and out the other, because I knew where it was coming from. I knew your intentions were good. I knew you only wanted what was best for me, but I just wasn't ready to process it yet or deal with it yet, acknowledge it yet. And as far as my recovery, there's certain things that I find are the foundations, and the 3 things are insight, self-awareness, and mindfulness. If you don't have insight to the fact that you have an illness and you need to change some behavior, you're spinning your wheels, and so is everybody around you who's trying to help you. There's a saying, you can't help somebody until they're ready to be helped. You can be there for them in certain ways. Try and make sure it's supportive and not enabling, which exists on the same continuum. Parents will support and support and support, and then they think, well, I'm not supporting enough, so they go more. Now you've crossed that line, and now you're enabling. We would love to let you enable us. We're good with that, but it's really not helping. It makes you feel better in the moment, but at the end of the day, you're delaying the inevitable, and somebody has to take the bull by the horns, and it's not always pleasant. In mental illness, you don't get many, you don't hardly any good choices. You get crummy choices and less crummy choices. You have to figure out which ones work best for you, which one's less crummy, and see how well you can make that work. Because they're just, and somebody says there's no good choices. Said if there were, there'd be a line around the world at that door. Everybody would be waiting to get into there. But you just, it's imperfect. It's unpredictable. No size, not only does no size fit two, no size doesn't even fit. I know one size does not fit all. One size doesn't even fit two. We're all unique individuals. That's what takes so much energy and time and caring. But, you know, and that's what can burn you out. And as a parent, that's what can frustrate you because you had expectations for your child's life. And that's hard. And, you know, there's another saying that about, you know, we as diagnosed people have to accept, you know, that our life is not going to look like we thought it was going to. And, you know, just find the joy in the story you're living now. And we do have to adjust our ceiling. When you start taking meds, there are things you can't do that you used to be able to do. But the hard part is to learn to not think less of yourself because of that. Don't feel like it diminishes you as a person. That's hard to do because we're already struggling with our self-esteem because we screw up a lot, and we know we screw up a lot. Some of us can admit it more than others, but we know it. We know when our parents are having a hard time because of us. We don't feel good about the fact that we're the reason. And if there's siblings in the picture, they don't shy away from letting us know we're the problem. And so it's difficult to have to live with that day in and day out. We don't get away from our diagnosis. You guys get occasional breaks. We don't. We wake up with it, we go to sleep with it. And the hard part is we never know sometimes if our meds don't work, how we're going to wake up the next morning, regardless of how we were when we went to sleep that night. And as far as, you know, the thing that we were talking about too, when Brian was talking about feelings and, you know, things that like anxiety, I tell people, you know, we're allowed to have a normal range of human emotions too, just because we have a diagnosis. Is that if something is causing you to feel really sad because somebody you care about died, that's not depression. That's a normal human emotion. There's a reason. If you're excited because you got $100 scratcher or somebody you hadn't seen in 2 years called you up, that's not hypomania. That's joy. That's excitement. Don't label all of our emotions as symptoms. Damn it. We're not just our illness. And people do it without realizing it sometimes. I understand that. There's a poem that's out there called You and Me. And it is so good. It's little couplets of stigmatizing language. When you have this, it's called that. But when I have the same thing, you call it this. And it's very obvious to us, but it's not always obvious to the person using the language. There's no intent behind it. They just aren't aware. And it's a good thing to hand to people so they can understand.
Jeff,
Yeah.
we're just about to wrap up this module. Do you want to field a couple of questions or do you?
Sure. Yeah. No. I'll take questions. I'm pretty much done. I mean, I'm just, one thing I want to share. My mother wrote to me when I got the award. I'm so proud for your recent accolades and, you know, let's see, but for your, and also for your strength and determination at every step along the way, never a step back in pain, with disappointment or just plain exhaustion. You're amazing, love, Mom. So when you have somebody like that in your corner, it's a lot easier to succeed. So keep that in mind, moms. So anybody have any questions for me at all? I am perfectly comfortable with any topic, any sensitive question. I'm pretty much trigger proof. So
Hi, Jeff. You said there was the three things: insight, self-awareness, and what was the third?
Mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness. And mindfulness is a hard one to do day in and day out. Once you have the insight, it doesn't go away for the most part. And the self-awareness, your meds help you be able to focus, but the mindfulness is the tedium. And so having to, you know, be paying attention all the time to see if you're getting triggered, knowing what your triggers are. And it's a lot of work. And a lot of people want to take breaks from that, take time off. And you can do it, but you can be like Sisyphus and climb that rock rolling right back down over your head. That's one of those things where, you know, you just can't, you can't take breaks. You can, but you may find out you regret it. Maybe back in the hospital or lose a relationship or lose your apartment. It can be very scary, dicey, you know, but it's your recovery to work. You know, and so it's a lifelong process, and you can't do it alone. So I tell people, build a support system. Call me as often as you need to call me. You know, I'm here. Call me back after we talk. Process it. I don't expect you to absorb everything we talked about for the last hour or whatever it was. So, and they say, oh, I don't want to call you. I'm sure you're too busy. It's no, I'm a volunteer. My caseload is one. Whoever I'm talking to at the moment, that's my caseload. So please, I feel bad if you didn't call back. So yeah, those are the 3 blocks. Anybody else?
Jeffrey, what's your contact number?
My contact number is 510-485-8116. And my email is just like you see it up here, except at yahoo.com.
Peggy?
I just wanted to say that Jeff is everything he says he is. And if you call him, if you call him up as a parent, he will give you some very strong, encouraging advice. I'm not going to say that he solves all the problems because it cannot. It cannot. And we're hoping that he can set up a support group in Berkeley sometime very soon for consumers, a connection support group. But I got to tell you, Jeff is everything that he says he is and more.
Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, I have not been a parent, but I've been told many times that from moms that I definitely seem to understand how moms' hearts work. And I do. I know that they can't give up. You know, I get that. But, you know, there's more than one way to be there for your child. And it isn't always the obvious way. You know, holding them accountable, having some kind of contract or agreement, and work with them on that. And not keep caving, because then you're sending the wrong message. Eventually you'll put your foot down and they'll wonder, what did I do different this time? Well, maybe nothing. Maybe you set yourself up because you kept doing it over and over again. And what they kept hearing was, oh, they'll always take me back. Doesn't matter what I do, how many holes I put in the wall or whatever else I do. And you want to believe that, and you want to believe you'll be, you know, that patient with your child, but you have a life to live too. And you have to have boundaries and limits, and you're not really helping them. You're enabling them when it gets to that point. So, and parents can hear that from me because they know I don't have any agenda. I don't have any dog in the fight. I just heard lots of parents share with me what they go through. I'm just passing it along, you know? So
I want to share one more thing about Jeff. He calls me up occasionally because he's worried he's not getting enough phone calls.
yes. Thank you, Peggy. I feel like, you know, I'm retired. I'm home. I want more calls, you know, and, you know, again, I can't fix anything, and I don't have any official standing, so I can't give people resources. What I can do is steer people to the more appropriate places so they don't waste their precious energy knocking on doors that are never going to open for them. And I say, if they open the door finally, before they close it on you, ask them where they should try, because they'll know better than I.
Okay, I've got to
Move along here.
Put in a break in here for us.
Okay, thanks everybody.
But Jeff, you know, you're staying to be on the panel. And so we'll have another opportunity to ask you more of your wisdom and good information. So thank you so much. We always love seeing you on this, especially in this workshop. Thank you.
I love being here. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. If you think of anything else, I'll be here at 3 o'clock. So
You bet. So let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll re-meet at 2:10. I know it's 2:03, so make it a 7-minute break, however that takes, but we're I think we're doing okay on time. And we'll hear from Benau again on another very important topic: communication, what to say to your loved one who is actively suicidal or having serious thoughts. So come back at 2:10 and we'll listen to Ben. Thank you. Ben?
All right.
All right. Okay, Benau. I'll just briefly mention Benau will be giving a most important presentation on communication, what to say to your loved one who is actively suicidal or having serious thoughts. Okay, Ben, let us know.
Yeah, well, I'm just feeling so inspired by everyone. Like Brian said, there's over 100 years of wisdom in this room, so I don't think I'll be sharing anything new. Um, and yeah, appreciate all the presenters, Brian and Jeff. And I feel just so connected and inspired by everyone. Before I dive into some of this material, I do want to take the time to remember the loved ones we have lost to suicide. I want to acknowledge the people here today who have lost someone. It's a special kind of pain and grief for us who are left behind. I've lost a few people, including a crisis line volunteer. Know that you're in community. We're here to support you, and we remember our loved ones. Today's conversation is, I'm reading this slide and it says what to say. And I think the point I want to make today is that it's less about saying and more about listening. I'd like to start off with just like a check-in question. If you could sit on a bench with a beautiful view for 1 hour with anyone alive or deceased, who would it be? And you're welcome to type your answer into the chat, or you can just shout out loud, unmute yourself and shout out loud. You can type their name. For me, there's a staff person who died in 2016. Joyce Williams was an overnight staff person, and she worked at the crisis lines up until the day she died. And I would love to spend a little bit more time with her. We always planned to go see a Marvel movie together. That was her way of taking care of herself, to escape to the movies. And I would love to watch a movie with her. Thank you for sharing on chat. Janet B, my late brother, and Marcia, your brother, and Brian, your father, and Rosemary, your father. Thank you. Leila, your mother. Would anyone be willing to share what they might talk about? How that conversation might be like? You could do it through chat, or you can say it out loud.
I'm happy to share.
Thanks.
COVID took my brother. It was shocking. And it was really unexpected. That was a year and a half ago, and we weren't done. So I miss him too. We're very close.
Mhm.
I would talk to him about our Native American background, because he and I were equally tuned into our tribe. And we're gonna miss that.
Thanks for sharing.
I would like to share too, and Big knows this because he was there to support me right at the beginning, but we lost our daughter to COVID as well. It was a set of circumstances where she was not being appropriately treated by her counselors and so on. She was actually doing pretty well, but she died of suicide two weeks after the lockdown. And I'm sure that the stress of COVID increased her feelings of hopelessness. And so that's why I'm dedicating my life for two things: to keep this from happening to other people, and to advocate for people that Sarah advocated for, such as people that are homeless and have nobody there for them. So that's my share.
Thanks, Peggy.
My son Danny died 14 years ago. And if I were to talk to him, I'd ask him what heaven was like.
Mhm.
He died of an accidental drug overdose.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm aware of 3 other clients of Bonita House who have committed suicide, but I didn't find out from Bonita House. They tend not to like to share those things. Sometimes families don't want it shared, and sometimes they don't like to share it for fear it will trigger other people. But I found out through other sources. So
Mhm.
during COVID, very hard. Isolation's the enemy. So there you go.
I'm hearing how much grief and loss we're all holding in this room. And I appreciate you sharing. The reason why I asked this question is I'd like to hear, to get to the heart of like what brings people meaning to their life, right? And definitely for so many of us, it is our family, both present and those who've passed on, and the values that we hold. Like Peggy was sharing how your daughter worked hard to be a voice for those who were, for the homeless population. And those values live on in all of us, and our loved ones lived on in our memories. And when we talk about suicide prevention here at the crisis hotline, so many of our conversations, we're talking to a complete stranger, right? And the person is talking about being in their worst moment in their life. And what we work to is to get to that underlying meaning. What brings you meaning to life, to your life? And try to understand what their underlying needs and what brings meaning to their life. I'm grateful to hear and get to know you and what brings meaning to your life. And Twee, would you like to share? The question is, if you could sit on a bench with someone who's alive or not with us anymore, who would it be and why? Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is a little bit more practical. Language matters. How we talk about suicide frames how we think about suicide, how we feel about suicide. This is from a website nowmattersnow.org, which I highly recommend you all know about. But here are some of the language that we may still use, right? And it's not a bad thing to use the language that is crossed out. We inherited this language through our medical field, through our training, to grad school. And there's some suggestions here on how to replace that language. But looking at this slide, I'm curious, what are people's reactions? What do you notice when you're reading through this list of language that we're recommending to use? Oftentimes, in media, or we use the word language of commit suicide, our loved one committed suicide, right? But the other things that we commit in society are commit crimes and commit sins. And so to continue that language, it continues to perpetuate this idea that having suicidal thoughts and feelings is a crime or a sin. And so we work to change the language. If someone's died by suicide, then we try to be a little bit more accurate in saying died by suicide. All right, I'll move on. Okay, this is an interactive piece. Imagine you're experiencing the worst day of your life. What do you want to hear? And I'll take notes. Maybe you'd want someone to say, I'm here to help. What else? You're welcome to shout out loud. Yeah,
Tell me why you're feeling this way.
awesome. Expressing curiosity or expressing care, inviting the person to share more. What else? What else would you like to hear if you're experiencing the worst day of your life? There are no wrong answers.
Well, one thing, just to say something as simple as so what seems to be going on instead of so what's the avoiding saying what's the problem, or because like when police go to a 5150, sometimes their language is so what's the problem here? Well, immediately the person feels like they're the problem and they're going to be to blame no matter what they say. So to not put that on them to begin with, make it more neutral. You know? Because language is powerful.
Yeah. What else? What else comes to mind? That would be helpful. If you're next to them or close to them, maybe offering a hug. Physical touch can be very healing, right? So offer. Any other, maybe one more thing you would like to hear if you're having a bad day?
Do you feel like talking about it?
Nice. These are all great suggestions. Like I said, I believe we have the answers in us today. I'm only offering some suggestions. The last time we were together, we also brainstormed up a list. And so I can share the list from last year. You're not alone. It's okay. This I wanted to say, I think it's okay to not be okay, right? Sending gifts or sending music. For some people, in my close support systems, we send each other funny memes, things that we see on Facebook or Instagram. We send a lot of pictures of pets and baby animals. Making a plan to get together. So whenever people are talking about suicide, right? They might be saying, I'm feeling like a burden, or I'm feeling trapped. Or they're expressing pain, like I just want to die. I'm in so much pain. We think of these as invitations for help. Most people who are suicidal don't really want to die. They want to change something about their life. And if we can help them. So yeah, when you're seeing these words or these behaviors, we consider them invitations for help. So we might see increased use of substances, people actively looking for ways to die, withdrawing from activities, or isolating from their friends, increased aggression. This ties very closely to Brian's conversation, right, about checking in with ourselves. sometimes these thoughts and feelings come up for ourselves, and that's a time when we need to increase our coping skills, increase our support. And sometimes our loved ones see these things before we do. These are invitations for help. So how do you know when it's like thoughts and moving towards something more serious, when there might be immediate risk? People might be talking directly about wanting to hurt or kill themselves. Maybe the person's actively looking for a weapon. Sometimes on Amazon, searching for a suicide kit. There are some people who, learn about carbon monoxide poisoning, and they might be looking for the tools, or giving away prized possessions, writing goodbye notes, etc. And even if a person is doing these behaviors, you're seeing this happen with their loved one, these are still invitations for help. The person's wanting help. But these are signs that things are a little bit more serious, and it's probably time to look for professional help. All right. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline had a campaign called Be the One To. And the rest of my presentation today will be based on the recommendations. And these suggestions are based in research. And you're welcome to, I'll have links to their website and to the research so you can learn even more. But the 5 steps to help a loved one who is thinking about suicide or talking about suicide: ask, keep them safe, be there, help them connect, and follow up. So let's talk about ask first. So now your loved one has shown you indicators, right? That they are struggling with suicidal thoughts and feelings. They've invited you to help. Ask directly, are you thinking about suicide? When you ask directly, you're communicating that you're open to having the conversation and that you're ready to talk about suicide in a non-judgmental and supportive way. It opens the door to talk about the emotional pain. Here are different ways to ask directly, so you keep these in your back pocket. Do you sometimes think about your own death? Do you sometimes feel so hopeless that you think about killing yourself? I'm curious, as you're looking at this list, how does it feel to ask this out loud? There's something in our training that we explore a lot with our trainees. It's kind of scary, right? Some of us might not feel very comfortable asking directly, are you thinking about killing yourself? Using that word kill is a very scary word. We know that if you can ask openly, it invites the person who is suicidal to share openly. In terms of cultural considerations too, it's something that we think a lot about here is, in some cultures, asking directly isn't really allowed or acceptable. I know in Chinese culture, there's this idea of familial piety. The parents, you respect your elders, and you don't really talk back to elders. You definitely don't question your elders. And so the notion of asking directly to an elder seems very challenging. The other challenge with cultural barriers is the idea of sometimes you don't even have the language. The language to the word for suicide in Chinese, might not really make that much sense. And so when we're trying to ask directly about suicide, the goal is to find the language to open that conversation, to say that it's okay to talk about those thoughts. They might be scary, and I'm here to listen. And truly listening deeply with your whole heart going to be one of the best medicines. Not having to change how the other person feels, not trying to problem solve, but slowing things down and listening. If they're with you, physically present with you, then there's a lot of opportunity for change. How many people have seen this before? Brene, it's like a cartoon with Brene Brown talking about empathy. No? Okay. Let's play this because she does a really great job describing the difference between empathy and sympathy. Okay, let me stop sharing because I need to make sure the sound works. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm gonna play this.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Brings tears to my eyes. But it's so much of what we've been talking about all day long, right? How do we continue to build that connection, to feel closeness, to help that person who is feeling suicidal to feel a little less lonely? On the crisis lines, we talk about the 4 essential active listening skills. This is borrowed from motivational interviewing, a great modality in substance use. It started off as a substance use counseling, but applies in all kinds of spaces. But it's easy to understand and easy for us to practice with ourselves and with our loved ones and to each other. How do you show that you're listening, right? How do you listen deeply? OR stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. And we'll dive into each of these skills a little bit here. Open-ended questions invite others to tell their story in their own words without having to lead them. Let the person take the lead. I think Jeff's really good at doing that. Of course, when you're asking an open-ended question, you got to be willing to listen to the person's response. So being quiet and letting the person go at their pace. We heard a lot of that in that practice call earlier today. Open-ended questions are opposite of closed-ended questions. With closed-ended questions, you only get like a yes or no. And that sometimes can feel like an interrogation, right? Have you been sleeping? Have you been eating? Those questions might make the person not want to talk so much. So asking open-ended questions of, what's led you to feel suicidal today? How have you been taking care of yourself? Affirmations are statements and gestures that recognize the person's strengths and acknowledge behaviors that lead in the direction of positive change, no matter how big or small. So affirmations, they benefit because they build confidence in one's ability to change. We're showing the person, right, that we see that person, how hard they're working to stay well. To be effective, affirmations must be genuine and authentic and accurate. So something you truly believe and see in that person. Reflective listening is the primary way we show that we have been listening. So this might include repeating or rephrasing what you're hearing, paraphrasing in your own words, what you understood the person said, and reflecting of their feelings. The deepest form of reflection is truly understanding what their needs are or what is meaningful to that person. And then finally summarizing, putting it all together. Here are some open-ended questions that can help explore resources that protect. What are you hopeful for in the future? What would you need to happen to make you feel more hopeful? What keeps you going in difficult times? Who do you think could be most helpful to you right now? How do you solve problems? What has helped in the past, and who can you turn to for help? We're exploring and tapping into that person's support system. And most people can solve their own problems, right? It's just that when we're in that crisis moment, we can't think clearly. So these open-ended questions help people, empower people to make their own decisions. So just to review, to listen deeply, we're using our open-ended questions to get the story. We're reflecting what happened. We're affirming the person's strength and their resilience, things that you're proud of that they may not see in the moment. And lastly, reflect ambivalence. For most people who are suicidal, there's a part of that person that wants to die, and there's a part of them that wants to live. And it's important to name that out loud. In our crisis line training, it's really important for us to not negate the reasons for dying. That we want to validate and understand why the person is calling today and why they're feeling those suicidal feelings, right? That both are true. There's a part of you that wants to die, and there's a part of you that wants to live. That's why you reached out and called us. And when we're exploring ambivalence, we're hearing what are their reasons for wanting to live. And typically in our crisis line calls, after hearing the story, we make a plan to help the person stay safe. So that's the next step. Let's keep them safe. We've opened the door. We've tried to understand, what's going on to lead the person to want to die. How do we keep our loved ones safe, know what their thoughts are, and help to make the environment safe? These are our really basic suicide assessment skills that we train on our crisis lines. We try to determine if they've already made a suicide attempt. So we ask, have you done something to hurt yourself today? We try to measure like how far they've thought about it. So do you have a suicide plan? Do you know how you might try to take your life? And then for most people, they might have a suicide plan, some passive thoughts. They might have pills in the kitchen, right? Or they might think about driving into traffic or driving in an unsafe way. So the next question that we ask is, do you have access to the means to carry out the plan? And as we're asking these questions, we do ask them in a specific order. The more, so let's say they did have a plan, but they don't have access to means, they're less at risk for dying. But if they say yes to these progressive questions, then the risk for dying is higher. So they have the means and they have a plan and they have intent. So that's the last thing we measure on a scale of 1 to 5. How likely are you to try killing yourself today? We try to measure intent. 5 being, very likely. The higher the intent, the higher the risk. We talked a lot about today too. Sometimes we can't control our thoughts and our feelings, right? But we might be able to make our environment safe. So the mean safety is a really important part of suicide prevention. So in our home, we do keep our medication. We have a small child, right? And then if someone is actively suicidal in our household, the medications are in a safe place in a lockbox. Related to guns, keeping guns safe. And it's not about like taking people's guns away from them. It's that it's part of gun safety. If we're in a mental health crisis, right, to stay safe, giving your gun to another person, a trusted adult, for the time being of the crisis makes sense. It helps you stay safe. And then when you're feeling better, get your gun back. We're not trying to take anyone's guns away. Other things that people might use to harm themselves, sharp objects, keep them out of the house. In some homes, people might have ceramic knives or plastic knives instead of metal knives. Yeah. Do people want to share in the room? How do you keep your environment safe? Or do any of these tools resonate with you? These are practical things that we can do to help our loved ones and help ourselves feel safe. Assessment, mean safety, it's about knowing how to ride through the storm together. And so I'll give you like a practical chart to help figure out, where our loved one is in terms of suicide risk, low, medium, high, or severe. And then what you might do if you see the person is in that state. So low suicide risk. That's someone that might have suicidal thoughts, right? But they're manageable. There's no plan, there's no intent. So, and the loved one is willing to engage in self-care and doing supportive activities. So if someone's expressing those low suicidal thoughts, the best action is to engage in their coping skills, engage in connecting activities, doing fun things together. It's also important to let people know that the thoughts are there. If those suicidal thoughts become more intense, maybe a plan is starting to develop. And the loved one is still willing to engage in self-care and supportive activities, that might be a medium risk now. So we're going to continue engaging in those coping skills and connecting activities. But maybe it's time to use the RAP plan when things start to break down, or when you're about to go into a crisis, or to use a formal safety plan to prevent the person from going into crisis. Maybe it's time to call a doctor or go to a crisis clinic. A high suicide risk is when the intensity and frequency of the suicidal thoughts and feelings are overwhelming our ability to cope on our own. The loved one might have a specific plan. They might be trying to look for means. And these are clear signs that the person is at high risk for suicide. So the action steps for that: don't let the person be alone. Make sure your environment is safe. Let the person's professional care team and natural support system, their friends and family, know that they are currently struggling, dealing with these suicidal intense thoughts. Use safety plan and seek professional help. And then lastly, if the person is actively attempting to kill themselves, or they're in the progress of attempting suicide, once again, don't let the person be safe. And that's usually when we need to utilize higher level of care. So calling the mobile crisis team might be appropriate, driving the person to John George or to the local emergency room is appropriate. When the person can't stay safe at home, alone or with you. Yeah, Marcia.
When would a person dial 988 on to this chart?
At all levels. That's a great part about 988. And the person in the council will be able to help the family member or the person in crisis figure out what the next steps are. And in the next 5 years, we're hoping that calling 911 at any level, right? The person who answers the phone at 911, if they see that the person's low risk for suicide and does not have plans or intent or means, they would transfer the call to us and we would answer the phone and talk to the person, provide emotional support. Calling 911 at any level, you might be able to have access to the mobile crisis team. And now the mobile crisis team would like to connect with people before they get to that crisis, before they're actively in danger. So yeah, calling 988 at any level, and in the near future, calling 911 as well. The people will be trained to direct the caller to the correct level of care. Great question. We're also trying to figure it out too. So the system isn't quite perfect yet. And that is the ideal, that there's no wrong door. And here is a list of some of the crisis services available. And I'll share with you a link, 988alamedacounty.org has all of this available for you. All right, so we know the person's in crisis. They're dealing with their suicidal thoughts. The next request for us is to be there, be the one to be there. So being physically present, being emotionally available, spending quality time together. There's some ideas. I'm curious to hear from the group. What do you do to connect with your loved ones? What do you do for fun when they're not in crisis?
Okay, I'll start it off. I visit my son who has, suicide risk and psychiatric disorder every week. And we go garage sale hopping. We go treasure hunting.
That's so
And it's
That's great. Yeah, doing things that help us feel close to each other, right? Treasure hunting, garage sale helping. So fun. Having like a goal to accomplish together.
We sometimes, my son and I just go on a drive, and that's when he opens up the most and talks. So driving is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. My wife and I have started to watch horror films. to get that catharsis. So wait for our 6-year-old to fall asleep. And then I turn on the movies, but then the sounds are too scary. And so our 6-year-old wakes up and comes out. And so we got these Bluetooth headphones that we can wear so we can watch the movies together without waking anyone else up. Cooking together, doing arts and crafts.
My daughter's in a facility and she's pretty isolated to her room. So we go to visit once a week. And I typically will sit on the foot of her bed and just quietly look through some of her photo albums and try to invite her to join me. Let her know that I'm there and willing to have conversation if she wants. But I come in peace and just try to let her be comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're physically there.
On a good day, I like to I like to connect with my brother. He's when he's on a good mood, we will get together, go for a walk. We will set a goal of how many miles we walk, and then after we complete our walk, we will reward ourselves. Do a nearby for a cup of juice or small drinks, you know. He likes to walk near the shore. Sometimes we will go out to the marina shore here in San Leandro. Sometimes we will go up to Lake Shobo. And if we have time, or when I have time, and then I like to take him down to the ocean. His mood seems to change dramatically. It goes from feeling sad or down low to being optimistic and look forward to doing things. He has been a source of he's everything to me. I loved him so dearly. Just be there, be present for him when he needed most. Because his other siblings are married and moved away. I'm so close to him, distant wise, so I connect to him on a regular basis. But in the last 2 weeks, I noticed that his mood swing. So he likes to be isolated on his, he seems to be a little moody. I'm finding ways to how to get him back to the moment where we have that time together, where we can go for a good walk, a regular walk, or talk, but it seems I don't seem to get him back to that. I cannot get him back to that side of that path again. For the last 2 weeks, he was down, and that affects me, but I gotta keep my head up and move forward.
I'm hearing your desire to, you want to see him be well and do these activities with you. I want that too. And there's only so much we have control over. Is he open to still going for walks? Or
The last time I checked in with him was 2 days ago, and he just wanted to be left alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have not hear and see that in him for such a long time, a very long time. But I had to respect his desire to be left alone. I don't want to talk to you now. I just want to be left alone. And he really mean it, and I can hear it in his voice. So I say, okay, I'm here for you whenever you need me. Please reach out. but I haven't heard from him. I will, because he stayed with parents.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I still really loved him a lot.
Yes, I
Yeah.
appreciate. Sorry. I appreciate you respecting his self-determination. And I also enjoy seeing the image of you both walking on the shore or at the beach, right? Being at the in nature is so healing.
Mhm. Sometimes we cook together.
Yes, cooking together is so great.
Sometimes we play together. Yes.
Yeah. Oftentimes when someone is in crisis or experiencing those intense suicidal or other emotions and thoughts, they might not want to even talk about it, right? Like spending time with you doing these activities day to day, self-care activities might be the best as a distraction from those thoughts and feelings. These are all great examples. And just like hearing Twee talk, it's about helping people connect. And you are all doing that. And we're creating these connections, we're helping to build a safety net. So other places to connect, they're connected to you as their family, right? Helping loved ones connect with a crisis line, coaching or training the person to call 988 or calling 988 together so that it's not that weird the first time. Connecting with community, so this could be like sports teams or other hobbies, dance community, church, connecting with mental health professionals, rap groups. Now that COVID restrictions are a little bit lighter, right? There's opportunities to attend groups. And then developing a safety plan. If you want to learn more about RAP, I think many people in this audience already know. Here's a link to learn more about Wellness and Recovery Action Plan. It helps so many people and it's so practical. I threw out the word like safety plan a lot. It is like so I wanted to explain what it might look like. This is what a safety plan looks like on our crisis hotline. It's filled out in the words of the person in crisis, so in your own words, very similar to RAP. And it's a prioritized list of steps. So step 1, you list some of the warning signs. Step 2, you list some of the internal coping skills that we can do on our own without the help of someone else. Step 3 are listing places or people, social settings we can go to where we don't have to talk about our problems, but will serve as a distraction. Step 4, listing the people, in our support system. And step 5 is our professional care team, our clinician. The crisis line number is part of our safety plan, and then listing our local emergency number. And that's going to be different for every family depending on your health insurance. So knowing where to go if you are in crisis. Step 6, making the environment safe. Step 7, the one thing that is most important to me and worth living for. A lot of clinicians use this as a way to, as a safety blanket. And this started in the VA system. And a lot of veterans reported back that having a safety plan empowers people to take care of themselves. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when people were suicidal, our recommendation is to go to the hospital, right? But those approaches aren't always helpful. There are a lot of options, a lot of ways we can take care of ourselves without having to go to the hospital, which is the most restrictive form of care. And having a prioritized list of things we can do to take care of ourselves when we're experiencing those suicidal experiences can help someone feel really empowered. Here's another form of safety planning. That someone can try on their own. I'm sharing these tools so that you are aware of them. But I do recommend, if someone's in suicidal crisis, that they talk about this with their therapist, with a trained professional who can walk them through using the tools most effectively. The last part of the Be the One to campaign is to be the one to follow up, to stay in touch with someone. Someone expresses they're suicidal, check in. In our crisis hotline, we do offer a few follow-up programs. If someone is experiencing suicidal crisis today, and we rate them as like a medium to high risk for suicide, but they have not attempted suicide, then we might stay in touch throughout the day. So for the next half hour, let's break up the day into manageable chunks of time, right? For the next half hour, what are you going to do to take care of yourself? Are you going to watch Netflix? Try to be really specific about what you're going to do. Okay, so you're going to watch Netflix. Is there a specific show that makes you feel better? Can you name that specific show? Okay, so for the next 30 minutes, you're going to watch The Simpsons, season 13. And when you're done with that episode, you can call us back or we'll call you back to see how you're doing. Yeah. This kind of setup can be really helpful too to prevent burnout from the caregiver. There are sometimes, and I've been on the phone with a loved one, right, for hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, trying to stay connected so that they're safe. And that is not sustainable for us as the caregiver. But if you can make these short safety plans, or if we're in the same household together, right, having the person go to another room and I'll stay in the living room, you stay in the bedroom, and we can do our separate things for a little bit and then we can reconnect. So yeah, following up. I have a link here if you want to read more, including reading the research behind these steps. And then the same tools apply for ourselves if we are also experiencing suicidal experiences. Our brains might tell us that we're alone and that we're worthless, right? Those thoughts come naturally sometimes. And so reminding ourselves that we are worth it. We're not alone. There's a room full of amazing people that we can reach out to. And then checking in with yourself. How are these suicidal thoughts? Or how intense are they? Are they manageable? And connecting with a trusted ally. These are tips that I heard throughout today and at past workshops. Finally, I want to make sure that you walk away with tools. I want you to know about the growing resources available in Alameda County. We are building out more mobile crisis teams and more crisis clinics. So this is a slide deck that I want you to have access to, where you can actually see pictures of the crisis clinics. Sometimes it's kind of weird, giving a referral to a place or asking a loved one to go to a clinic. You don't know who's going to be there. How are they going to treat us? Are they going to treat us nicely? And so going through these slides, you can learn about the different crisis resources available. I'm happy to come back to a meeting to share more about the expanded resources.
Ben?
Uh-huh.
One of the caveats of this is that if you have private insurance. Some of these will not take, I mean, some of these are strictly Medi-Cal, I guess is another way to,
Mhm.
so, that's a whole nother chapter, a whole nother universe, yeah.
Yeah, how to access care when you have private insurance.
You're not eligible for the good stuff that's in the community.
Mhm. The people that are in the gap where they make enough money where they don't qualify for Medi-Cal and they pay for health insurance, but that health insurance does not cover adequate mental health resources. I'm happy to talk to people individually too. You have my cell phone if you want to check in about how you might access health and mental health crisis care through your insurance. And Marcia's a wealth of knowledge as well. But yeah, you're right. There is a gap. The mobile crisis team will be able to serve you regardless of health insurance status. So that's nice. If you think that a visit on site and an assessment on site is going to be helpful, in the mobile crisis team. I put together this website just before launch day of 988 as the crisis number, as a number to easy to reach our crisis hotline. The vision for the county is the first step, that there is someone to call if you're in mental health crisis, regardless of health insurance, right? You call 988 and get support. In the next 5 years, we hope to build out our mobile crisis team, that there will be someone available to respond and to visit you if you're in crisis. I wanted to show you this resource here. You can search by city and figure out Pleasanton, what resources are available. So we have the mobile crisis team that's run out of the county, and you can reach them, but they're only Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The CAT team has expanded their hours to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So, is there a resource here that is missing that you know about? Oh,
I'd like to, how do I get a hold of that list?
Yeah, go to 988alamedacounty.org.
Oh, okay, great.
alamedacounty.org.
Thanks.
And as the system continues to grow, I'll try to keep the list updated.
I feel so much better having that as a resource to give people who aren't necessarily suicidal, but need to get not to the police, but to somebody who's trained in mental health.
Exactly.
I think it's a great step forward. I really do.
Yeah, the CAT team's amazing. There's an EMT worker and a mental health clinician who would come out to visit. I was working an overnight shift and it was very stressful. This mom had called and she had come home to see her daughters had cut themselves. And it was hard to know if it was a medical emergency or not. And it was like 2 a.m. and they were living in Hayward and the closest hospital is St. Rose. And they're like, we don't think we'll get good care if we go to that hospital. So we decided to, they decided to try to go to sleep because nothing's really open at that time. And we would check in the morning. And so at 7 a.m., I called them. They had slept through the night, which was good. And I told them about the CAT team. And the CAT team was perfect. They were able to respond within 30 minutes. And they were able to assess the medical needs to make sure that the wounds were okay. And then also provide the mental health care.
So may I add something though? There is a CAT team, but it's only for the city of Pleasanton. I am not sure if the CAT service through Alameda County is reaching Livermore, Dublin. And I know of maybe one in the past year that has been served by the CAT team. So I know there's mobile crisis as well, but it doesn't necessarily meet the needs out here. So that's why I think that was one of the drivers for having the access bridge, urgent or mental health urgent care service that was funded by the local cities. And then behavioral health care put in for a pilot, funding for a pilot 1-year study, which was resoundingly effective. And we will have someone from Access Community Health next month talking about where they're at on this. The point being that anyone in Livermore, Dublin, or Pleasanton, regardless of insurance or not, will be served at no cost. So that's just a major, offer for this area. Otherwise, we basically would not have anything like this for everyone. So I want to make sure people are aware of that, at least in Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton area. Okay.
And here in the East Bay, I think most people are aware, City of Berkeley has their own mobile crisis team that only serves Berkeley residents, and the entire rest of Alameda County has to be served by the county mobile crisis team, which is like 50 miles in diameter or whatever it is. So
as I understand, they're one of two cities. Long Beach is the other, that have their own mental health system outside of the county. So, okay.
Well, I think I'm almost done. Just want to reiterate, taking care of yourself. When we're caregivers, it's easy to burn out. I really appreciate Brian's reminder earlier for us to take care of ourselves. And I invite you to join our team. We have training. We train new volunteers every quarter, and it's a lovely way to practice these skills and to build community. We have about 100 volunteers who show up every week. And I know you're already doing a lot of this in your own personal life. So to think about having to do this outside of that might be a stretch. But yeah, if you're looking for something to do, we're here. We're always looking for volunteers to help answer those 988 calls.
Ben, you've been fantastic. Thank you for hanging out with us today.
My pleasure.
Through a couple of hours of talking with us and teaching us and enlightening us. I don't know how to thank you enough.
Well, no thank is needed. I feel enlightened, and I feel like I get so much more out of these times together.
Yeah.
You teach me so much.
Thank you. We'll still be in touch, even though you've moved into another realm on your job. So, we'll be in contact at some point. Thank you very much. Okay. We next will have our panel, and I think the way that we'll do this is, this is our final portion of the workshop. So we'll have Brian Lawrence, Mark Rahman, and Jeff Kiola, and you, all of you. And this is your chance to ask questions, to see, anything that you want to learn more or, share, or this is your chance. All we're asking is if you could just put that in the chat, because I think it'll be easier.
There is already a question in there for Ben about the difference between MCT and CAT teams, to explain what those mean.
Sure. They're two separate teams. One is run through the county and one is run through Falk / Bonita House. So the mobile crisis team, MCT, their hours are more limited, and to reach them, you call their dispatch. And then the CAT team, they have a EMT worker plus a mental health clinician. And their hours are more expanded. To reach the CAT team, if you call 911, the dispatch, and if you call 911 and tell the dispatch that it's a mental health crisis, then they will connect you to the CAT team. Anything to add, Marcia?
So 911 would know which team to connect you to?
They should.
And if 911 doesn't, 988 definitely should. That's kind of their area. We
That's
hope.
that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
We don't want 988 to be a barrier to care too. And so if you believe that someone should come visit your loved one, right, then call 911. And they have a direct access to the CAT team. We're still trying to get their backdoor number so that we can make direct referrals, but we would be calling 911 to access the CAT team at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. I don't want to send people on wild goose chases. I hate giving out wrong information. I can't stand it.
Yeah. Even if you send them to us, though, we will hold on to them until they are in the right place.
Okay.
I just want to thank everybody for all of the information. Very, very helpful, and appreciate you taking the time to teach us. Good information, really good information.
Questions?
My daughter has not really been suicidal, that I would say, but I've heard a lot of negative talk from her through the years. Like, I hate my life. I wish I was never born, those kind of things. So I don't know if she was actually suicidal, if she would be seeking help or saying, just go away, get out of here. I don't want to see you go. I don't know if she would be more open to hearing, I just want to help. Do you want to talk about it, or that those kind of interventions that we've talked about today? I don't know if there's a brain switch when they're really serious about wanting to do something to end their life, that if they're a little less angry and more open to someone's presence, or if they would still be potentially more in that angry state, just go away, I don't want to see you.
Who would like to answer that? And
Can I ask how old your daughter is?
She's 28.
Okay, so she's not transition age youth.
Psychotic, schizoaffective with bipolar,
Okay.
autism spectrum.
I think peer support groups are a good way for her to go because it's not authoritarian. There's no clinicians in the group. Parents aren't there hovering. It's totally confidential, and she'll be with people who are going through the same thing she's going through. Because I think sometimes the challenge is feeling like you're the only one going through it. I know that was my early challenge, both feeling like I was alone and feeling like everybody was trying to run my life. And I was 54. So I can imagine what it's like for younger people. I can't really imagine, but hypothetically, it's got to be harder. But bipolar support groups are a good place to get your feet wet. And with its Zoom, it's less intimidating. You can sit in your own bedroom and you don't have to be in a room with 12 other people in person, and just to sort of check it out and see how it feels. And she can always leave discreetly with its Zoom if it's not it's not a good fit. But I think it's always a good starting point.
Living in a facility, she has staff around her all the time. She's
Oh.
not really capable of being on
Okay.
a Zoom herself.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and in the last
I
2
bet.
years, she's really isolative. So she hasn't been interested in doing any of the group activities in the facility that she's in. They're struggling to get her out of the room at all.
Is it against regulations for her to have an online in her
No, it's
room?
not. It's not.
Well,
She
maybe,
has that ability, but she doesn't use it at all. It's like her cognitive state isn't quite there to be able to use it
Okay.
anymore.
okay. Well, if somebody could be there to walk her through it and get her into the group, that's a possibility. But I guess if it's not prohibited, this is the barrier is her being ready and being capable. So.
Yeah, I think at this stage, she just prefers to isolate and doesn't want to connect with anyone.
Yeah, okay. Well, they're always there twice a week, every week of the year. So it's not like you're going to miss out on the opportunity. So
Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody needs to be heard. So usually it's not that difficult to get somebody to start talking. Okay, especially if, like Ben explained about how to be present, how to ask open-ended questions, all of these kinds of things. Most of the time, somebody will be willing to start opening up. And as long as they don't feel shut down, they'll keep going. Because most of the time, people feel that they've never had a chance to be heard. However, there are those difficult times when somebody just doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to interact, wants to be alone, which is a spiraling down situation. And I don't know too many techniques on that one, other than try to make them in control and the expert. That is, you ask them to explain things to you. Acknowledge your lack of not only expertise, but just awareness of exactly what's going on. Anything you can get them to open up on, even if it's not directly related to what you want to talk about, that can get things started, is a beginning. That once you've got people talking, you've got a chance. And most people have just a little bit of arrogance that if somebody thinks they're the expert, they would really like to explain things to you, lecture you. And giving them this opportunity might, not certainly, but might get them to get started. Just getting started, anything. And if it's autism, usually there's something they're interested in that they focused on, and they might want to talk about that more than anything else in the world. And so if you just ask them, could you explain to me what's so important about X? And then sit back and wait, because you're going to be in for a long explanation, but that opens up, the doors to be able to then use these other techniques.
Janet, were you the one that was saying earlier in the day that you would go and just sit on her bed and look at photo albums? Yeah, it doesn't really apply, but there's a saying that we have in therapy: you never want to be working harder than your client, right? And that's true in parenting. It's much easier said than done. And sometimes just showing up and just being that presence, you can maybe say, I see you isolating. It concerns me. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. And sometimes that's about as much as you can do. But just showing up and just expressions of sincere concern are always helpful. And kids will listen. They won't always respond to you. And same with folks with mental illness too. But at least you're showing up.
There's been moments of breakthrough every now and then, but over at least the last year, she has not believed that we are her parents.
Yeah. And that may very well be something that's part of her disorder, not a personal thing, even though
Right.
I'm sure it sure as hell feels personal. But yeah,
So we're typically not welcome in her room.
yeah,
Um,
that's got to be
it's-
hard.
It's difficult.
Yeah, I'll bet. I couldn't imagine. But just showing up when you can, or at least her knowing that you're there, you know, or
No.
yeah.
I find that my not having any official title or standing works in my favor, where they just see me as another person on the end of the phone who's going through similar things. And it seems to me they feel safe within a 5-minute period talking to me on the phone, and I just let it go from there. Let them take the lead, because I can't ask questions. I can't pry. They'll shut down. Then I just sound like another clinician. So I sit back and reflectively listen, like Mark talked about, and like Brian talked about, and like Ben talked about. Just paraphrase, make sure I'm hearing what they're saying and giving them a chance to rephrase it in case I didn't get what they were trying to say the first time. Let them be the expert. No, I wasn't clear on that. So can you help me? Then they have the power, and they can share as much or as little as they want because they're totally in control. I have no authority over them.
But at least that person initiates the call.
Well, that person has to initiate the call. And the problem too is when parents give them my number, they know they're coming from their parents. And so already they're thinking I'm biased. So that's kind of an obstacle. But, there are challenges, that's for sure.
I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that everybody's been sharing today. It's been like a warm hug.
You're very welcome. It's like with grief. Sometimes the only thing there's nothing you can say to people, and actually, sometimes so many wrong things are said. But just showing up, and if she doesn't want to see you, at least some way for her to know that at least you're available for her. Yeah, which I know you're doing. So.
That comment about a warm hug, one of the reasons I miss the in-person workshops is because I always got 1 or 2 warm hugs from moms after I finished them. I can't tell you how much that meant to me. It just meant the world. It was so nice.
I miss the snacks too. We have to dig
up.
Yeah.
I'll take the hugs anytime. I can always get my own snacks.
So Jeff, I just have a quick question here. You run support groups in Berkeley, peer-to-peer? You used to? Are you muted?
I did for 15 years when we were live. When COVID hit, I will admit, I was so spoiled. I've done over 3,000 in-person groups over the years. And I'm a good facilitator because I make eye contact, I watch body language, I pick up on the energy, I can scan the group and see who's getting a little escalated and agitated. And it's just setting a safe tone because in my own energy, my own presence. Zoom does not work for me. I felt frustrated because I knew I was inadequate at doing a good job, and I felt the members of the group deserved better. So I stepped back and I started doing the phone calls and the emails like I do for San Francisco DVSA. So I do that part now, but I did it for many, many years, and I would love to get back to it because Zoom is something, but it's kind of like prime rib live, bologna on Zoom. It doesn't have the same substance and value, but better than nothing. But it's I know the difference. Other people who don't know the difference might not miss it.
Sure. And when you get back, it would be somewhere in Berkeley?
Somewhere in the East Bay. That's what NAMI is hoping for me to be able to get a peer support group running for NAMI, because they're, NAMI's been primarily family, friends, and caregivers with some support for the consumer. And DVSA's been kind of the flip side of that coin, where they've done mostly consumers with a little for the families. So NAMI is wanting to do more for the consumers now, which is why they asked me to come on in and see what I could bring to the table. And I'm thrilled.
You mean NAMI Alameda County?
Yeah, I'm sorry, NAMI Alameda County in the
Yeah,
East
I
Bay.
want to make sure, so there's no confusion, because
Yeah,
each,
not the East Bay chapter, but they want me to have it located somewhere in the East Bay because their other one is down in Fremont. So they want it geographically more available to people in that part of Alameda County.
Well,
If that
NAMI,
makes-
NAMI Tri-Valley has the Connections Support Group, which is for consumers.
And where's that located?
Well, currently
You're on Zoom.
doing one a month online still, but one is now in person at
Yeah,
our
on
new
Zoom,
office
on Zoom.
in
And that's-
Livermore.
Was it? Oh, Livermore. Okay. Yeah. See, that's like East County, and they're trying to cover as much as possible, to make it available to people geographically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we've got it covered out here.
yeah, and that's great. But, Fremont, if you live in Oakland or Berkeley, Fremont's a long haul, especially if you're going and dealing with traffic. So, yeah, that's the hope.
Same here. It's
Yeah.
pretty legal. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, like I say, Mark and I have discussed, as we've been the planners of this workshop this year, and so we're looking at maybe a hybrid next year. Am I right on that, Mark?
We're looking at it. We're hoping somebody comes up with the technology to make it easy.
Yes, and if not, I think at least one, meaning me, I will be looking into setting up somehow so we can do this with people live in person in a room, and then also anyone who wishes to use Zoom. And the consensus, at least on the family support groups, is some are fine with Zoom and some really, really, really need to be in person. And I'm an in-person person. So it will be a lot, we'll be able to give, the best of both worlds.
What I like about the in-person workshops, Marcia, is that people get to visit with each other during breaks and lunch and chat
I do
in
too.
person. And that's just, I love to see it happening. I love to see people who didn't know each other at all. They just bond because they know they're in the same boat, and you can see they feel safe, they trust, and it's hard to find a place like that where you can have that.
I totally agree with you. And actually, after over 2 years, there was a grand opening for our new office, and there was a couple that joined up with in the celebrations, and these were faces on a screen. This was the first time after 2 years that I actually got to meet them, and it just made it so much more meaningful, to have that connection. But it's, for people, it's difficult. We have one person in the support group that lives in Tennessee, and yes, he has family connections here. Someone else for a while from Arkansas, so it just wouldn't happen this way. It just wouldn't without Zoom. So it's
it does have that advantage. More people geographically can get to any group anywhere. We have people who left our DBSA group, moved to Michigan and Central California, and now all of a sudden they can come back to their old home group. And so that's, it's better than not being able to. And
I mean, some people want to do more than one support group. They want, kind of visit other,
check out other groups.
So it's, there's a lot of flexibility, but I would love to see this. I'm stepping out to say, yeah, we're gonna do this next year in August. It'll be the 9th. And I'm looking for one more volunteer. to work with Mark and I, because I'm tired. As much as I care about this, it's very near and dear. Yes, so.
Well, you know, I'm tech challenged, so I don't think I'd be a whole lot of help. I'd be more of a liability.
So you come out and see us in a year, huh?
Yeah, I'll be there. You know, you talked about meeting those people in person after they were just, you know, faces on a screen. I've gone in another area where I talk to people on the phone over and over, or maybe an email, and then I get to see them on Zoom. So at least I have a face to go with the name, even if it's not the in-person person.
Yeah.
And that's nice to have a face to go with the name.
Yeah, that does help. You
Yeah.
know, it makes it a little more real. Does anyone have any other questions they'd like to ask the panel? Or again, this is because we're fairly small at this point. I mean, we can keep it.
I have a
all-
question for Mark. Mark, the stats you shared earlier, they were great, by the way. Are they every 2 years? You said 2018 and 2020. Is that how
I
it
just
works?
needed enough to make a difference to make the difference pop out more. There's 2019. You can the numbers go back to like 1980 if you want. If you go
No, that's okay. What is the latest? Is 2020 the latest or
2020 is the latest. It takes them
that's
2 years to get the stats into the database. Because it takes a long time for, like I say, the coroners to make the reports and then all be collected and then be verified and have people check them over and see if there are obvious errors. Yeah, it all takes time. So something like 2 years to get it up to where you can look at them.
Thanks. That was actually great.
They do have a subset of states that report constantly, and you can get a sense of what's going on from those states. And I'm not sure how many, 17 states or something like that.
So wait, the numbers you shared was national, right?
Correct.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that would be interesting to see how some states do underneath. Do they
Yeah.
have the breakdown by state?
If you want it, yes.
Yeah, okay. No, I didn't ask
Yeah.
you to do it. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, they've got, it's a database, so you can do a lot of manipulation with it. You can do age groups, gender, race, some cultural ethnicities, and like that, and play around with it.
Mhm.
And so, and it's just, there are groups of people who are much more prone to suicide or to having suicide completions. And so the statistics are hinting at something. They are tantalizing, but it would take quite a lot of research to verify what they're trying to tell us. Get down, because there's some hints that, for instance, one of the growth areas in suicide is older white men, 75 and up, or actually now it's 65 and up. And my feeling is it's a loss of status, that they've had, they've been at the top of whatever pyramid they're at for so long, and to lose that status when they retire, because so much of our culture is tied up in what job you do, that they don't have a reason to live anymore. Their whole value of themselves was tied up in their position, their social and status position, that they don't see a reason to live anymore. But that's, like I say, that's tantalizing. It would take a lot of research to verify something like that.
Hey, Mark, do you have Jeff Keola's phone number?
It's in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's first line. It's 510-485-8116.
Thank you.
As I read it off here. Yeah. Yeah, it's down, it's next to last chat.
Thank you so much.
And Jeff, you mentioned some of those groups on Facebook. That's not you, right? That's the groups.
No, that's the group. I'm an administrator for the family group. I'm just a member of the bipolar support group. And you have to answer a few questions and be approved to go in. They're closed in the sense that other people can get into that you may not want to know what you're posting, but you can post anonymously too. So you don't have to put your name in there. And it's the nice things about these groups are they're not nearly as refined or focused as some of these other groups, but they're 24/7. You know, if it's the middle of the night, you're ruminating on something, or you really need to just put something out there and get feedback. And a lot of these groups discourage giving advice. Well, these groups, you know, we try and be kind with our advice. We have monitors, that sort of thing, but people are there to get advice a lot of the time. They're not compelled to follow it. They're just looking for feedback. They're looking to find out what other people are going through, especially families. So, you know, it's, and they're probably never going to meet these people in real life. So it's that other level of safety. So yeah, they're both really, I find them both very helpful as groups. They fill another area that can't be filled so easily when you need to be a member of a group by some affiliation.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Mark, what you were saying about men is like, yeah, we are women less than they used to be, but men have always been defined by the work they do, and that's their value in society. And when they lose that, yeah, their self-esteem and their self-worth is sort of lost to them. And then if they lose their wife, we all know that women live longer than men do after the husbands die. Men don't do quite as well. So there's that factor too, I think. But again, there's a lot of factors to say would have to be parsed out, more research.
Thank you to all speakers. You guys were all great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And ladies.
So at this point, I guess we're a little bit earlier than our schedule, and that's not a bad thing. If I could ask kindly of each of you here to fill out a 5-question evaluation, and very good. Okay, Mark just posted the link. It's a Survey Monkey. It's quick, it's easy, and it's our lifeline to the next workshop. It's that important that we know. And you know, I thank you all. I can't believe we did this. And Mark is laughing because he knows what I it's like, I actually did get sleep. So this is always satisfying. It's near and dear, I'm sure, to all of us, or we wouldn't be here. And you have my undying respect, and I can't thank you to all the presenters. You know, there's not enough adjectives in my sentence here to thank you enough. And okay, Jeff, Mark, Ben, Brian, Lynn, would you please come back next year?
Of course. And I just want to thank everyone. As I said earlier, you're here on a Saturday trying to find out how to better help your loved ones. That's so much right there. And sometimes that's all you can do is just try to find out what more you can be doing that would talk.
Yeah, Brian, just to piggyback on that, whenever family members show up to our open groups at DBSA, I emphatically congratulate them for getting their butts to the meeting and not just paying lip service, and really showing up for their loved one to learn how to love them in ways that help. Not just, we know they love them, but it's so counterintuitive a lot of the time that it really helps to hear from other families. People are familiar, then you can go about it from a different approach. Try this tool, or well, that worked for us, maybe it'll work for you. The more tools you have, the better chance you have. So yeah, congratulations everybody for taking the time to be here. That's showing up for your loved one. That's what this is, plain and simple.
Brian, there's a message in the chat. I don't know if you saw that. Okay.
Yep, I'm busy hunting and pecking away right now.
Sound like somebody's old enough to use a typewriter. Hunting and pecking.
What's a typewriter?
Remember those things? Antique.
There we go. Oh, let me put that in the general chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I got your phone number written down, but I lost your email, so I'm
Oh,
looking for it. Cool.
yeah, here we go. I will always come back, Marcia, as long as you ask. So happy to do
Same
it.
here. I'm always
Thank you.
looking for the opportunities.
Thank you. And I think next year will be even better and better. No, I don't mean it that way, but even better. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe there's some fantastic discovery in science. I always hope. And, you know, meanwhile, we'll, you know, and hopefully everyone stays well, that their families stay well, their loved ones stay, you know, everything. And I hope today was helpful all the way around. I always learn something new, or it's really reaffirming. This is the 8th time experiencing this and planning it and so forth. But I always learn something new, or it's a good reminder of all the good things to hold on to. And the most of you here know are familiar with each other to some degree, and you know, anything can change on a dime for most of us and our family members. So I hope to see you next year, and for most of you I will see you in a couple of weeks at our support group. So so thank you.
Everybody, please, you have my number. Use it. Okay. Like Peggy said, I want calls.
Oh, well, we'll try to keep you busy.
Good.
All right. So I